Hello and welcome to SourceCAD. In this video, you'll learn Revit architecture right from scratch using a simple residential house project. Now, this tutorial is for an absolute beginner, and if you know nothing about Revit architecture, then this is a great starting point for you. This tutorial is made by Scott Onstott, who is a published author of several books and author on LinkedIn Learning and SourceCAD. Now, following are the topics that you will learn in this tutorial series: making project settings and template, designing building footprint, making generic walls, building roof, painting materials, sketching the ground and second floor, adding curtain walls, adding doors, editing wall profile, laying out the kitchen, editing furniture family, designing attached garage, adding Cybertruck to garage for a scale, editing title block on the sheet, creating PDF outputs, and much more. So with that, let's get started.
In this video, I'm going to build a complete residential project from scratch using Autodesk Revit 2024. And I'm not going to assume that you've ever used Revit before. So I'm going to build your knowledge from first principles up to this design development of a residential project. And this is just a small taste of a much larger course that I've built, and the link is in the description. So if you'd like to learn more, check that out. Start at the beginning and create our project. I'll go to New here under Models rather than Families. Families are components that go inside of models. So I want to make a brand new model. I'll click on New, and then we have this dialog box lets us choose the template. And it used to be in previous versions of Revit that there were many different templates to choose from, but that's all been massively simplified here, where there's just two templates, imperial or metric multidiscipline. I'm going to be building this in imperial units, that's feet and inches. And if you are using metric, you can build your project in metric, but you'll have to convert my distances into metric on your own. Or you can just follow along with me on the same page by using imperial. So we'll create the project and click OK. And so Revit will make a new project file based on this template. And this new template has tons of information already built into it. And in fact, it probably has more than I need. So right off the get-go, I see that I'm in level 1, architectural, up here on this tab. And that is the view that is open. So down here, this thing is called the project browser. And we have the thing that's in bold is the one that's open. So we can see right here, this is level 1, architectural. And let's just explore how this is organized to start with. So we have the different disciplines. We have architectural coordination, which refers to all the disciplines and coordinating them together. And then we have electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and structural. Below that, we have different categories of elements like legends, schedules and quantities, sheets, families, which are the components that go inside your model, groups, which are groupings of elements, and Revit links. These are links to other Revit files. So I'll just expand architectural, and within that we have these different categories. So we have floor plans. It looks like we have two levels set up, level 1 and level 2. We have a site plan, which I'm not going to use. We have ceiling plans for levels 1 and 2. And we have elevations in all of the cardinal directions. And we have just one working section. So what we're seeing here on level 1 are these markers on north, south, west, and east. And these are elevation markers. If I zoom in by rolling the mouse wheel, you can now see that this elevation, the west elevation, is currently drawing number 1 on sheet A204. And so if we look in the project browser, we should be able to see that here under Sheets, A204. And sure enough, there is the west elevation on that sheet. So this has already been set up for us. We can use this out of the box, or we could adapt it and change it to our own purposes. We'll probably do a little of both. But sheets are something that kind of come later in the project flow when you're really laying things out on these individual sheets to be printed or created into a PDF. So now I'd like to view the entire architectural plan. I'll double click the mouse wheel to zoom all. All right, now what else do we see here? We have this red dashed line here, and this represents a working section right here. A working section is different from a regular section in that the working section is just meant for your own use while you're designing. It's not something that's going to appear on your sheets. That's the distinction. We also see these dashed green lines, and these are reference planes. So this is totally optional. And the way that it looks like they've designed this template is the elevations are right on these lines. I think that's fine. I'll be keeping the reference planes just as a way of sort of creating a coordinate system or an origin point where they intersect, which will be the center of my project. So I'm going to look forward to building my residential design right in the middle here. And what else do we see? Down here we have a north arrow and a graphic scale bar. And these are nice to see on a sheet, but I'm really not very fond of seeing them in my working floor plans. So I'm going to actually erase these by selecting them and pressing the delete key on the keyboard. Again, double click the mouse wheel to zoom extents or zoom all. And what else do we see here? Well, this here is called a scope box. And scope boxes are very useful to contain your grids and levels. And this is most useful in a large project that has a column grid, has multiple levels. It's a way of lining all these things up. And I don't think that's necessary for a residential project. It's sort of overkill in my opinion. So I'm going to click on this scope box and delete it. I don't need it. And then that leaves us with this white box. What is this? This is what we call the crop region. And it has these little squiggle marks on it, which allow you to break that. And normally with a crop region, you would see little round grips right along the midpoint of each edge, and I'm not seeing them. And that's a tip off. This crop region is dependent upon a scope box. And so that means there's a hidden scope box, believe it or not. And what I'd like to do is make it visible. So over here in the properties palette, we have the properties of whatever we select. So if I click on this reference plane, I'm going to see the properties of that reference plane. It's very simple. If I click on this elevation marker here, I'm going to see its properties. You can see up here, it says elevation, building elevation, and it has properties for that. If I click off to the side, I deselect everything. And what I'm seeing now are the properties of this view. This view is a floor plan. And so these properties pertain to this view. So if I scroll down in the list, somewhere in here, I'm going to find scope box, and it's set to views overall. This is a named scope box. I'm going to open this up and choose none. Okay, so this view no longer has a scope box attached to it. What that means is that when I click on this crop region, I now see these grips that were previously missing. And if I move this outside, this reveals the scope box that was there. You see, we had the scope box controlling the scope of what we were seeing in the view. Now I've liberated it from the crop region. I'm going to select this scope box and delete it. All right, so now I have this crop region, which controls what I see. So if I bring this in, it's going to crop away the things that go beyond it. And this is going to be useful later on when we have an actual project in here. But for now, I'd like to hide that by clicking right here, hide crop region. So now I don't see that rectangle. We can get it back at any time just by showing it. All right. So I've simplified things a little bit by getting rid of those two scope boxes.
Now, before we move any further, I have a message for you. We have a full-length Revit architecture course made by Scott Onstott where you learn everything about Revit right from scratch along with instructor support every step of the way directly from Scott. And all of this is available for a small monthly subscription fee. So if you want to learn Revit directly from published authors right from scratch, then check the Revit course on SourceCAD. The link is in the description of this video. Now, back to the video.
I'm ready now to kind of design the footprint of my building. And what I'd like to do is design my residence based on the golden rectangle, which is a proportion that's been used for centuries by artists and architects, because the golden rectangle is recognized as being a very aesthetically pleasing proportion. And so I'm going to use that in my design. I'm going to zoom in now on the intersecting reference planes by positioning the cursor over this and rolling the mouse wheel forward. That allows me to zoom in. If you drag the mouse wheel, you pan. And if you roll the mouse wheel, you zoom. It's really simple. So in this region is where I want to build my building. To kick off that process, I'm going to draw in a golden rectangle. Okay? Now, how am I going to draw that? On the Architecture tab, we have all kinds of different tools for making objects, walls, doors, windows, and so on. Now, what I want to do is just sketch something. And the way that you do that is with a model line. The model line is used for creating not just lines, but arcs, circles, polygons, all kinds of things. And the shortcut is LI on the keyboard for line. And when I click on that, now I have the draw toolbox up here. And this gives me access to all these different geometric forms, like rectangle, different kinds of polygons, a circle, NURBS curves called splines, arcs, ellipses, and so on. We also have line style, and this is the representation of that line, whether it's going to be a dashed line, a hidden line, a center line, and so on. In this case, I just want to use lines, which will draw green lines, and they're just green by default, but you can change that. I don't see a reason to do that at this point, but we'll just stick with lines. And what I'm going to do now is just draw in my first ever line. So I want to be on this tool, line, and I'm going to click some arbitrary point on the screen. And as I move the cursor around, you can see that we have the ability to draw that line in different length and at different angles with respect to the horizontal. What I want to do is draw a horizontal line. So I'm going to bring the cursor down here until it pops into this horizontal view. And as I move the cursor around, you'll see that we're moving in what looks like 6-inch increments. And the amount that you're moving, the granularity of space, is based on how far you're zoomed in. So if I zoom out by rolling the mouse wheel, if I zoom out enough, we're going to pop into every 4 feet. If I zoom in more, then we have the ability to go every 6 inches. If I zoom in more, we have the ability to specify each inch. And if I were to zoom in even more, I could go down to fractions of an inch. So you need to zoom in to some point where you're able to specify, let's say 27 feet is what I'm going to settle on. 27 feet. I'll click there to create my first line segment. And now I'm in chain mode, and that's up here on the options bar. This is called the options bar right here. And it has, as you guessed it, options for whatever you're doing. And right now, if I'm in chain mode, and that means I can continue drawing line segments. But I don't want to do that right now. I want to cancel out of this and end this command. So I can press escape once to end the chain. But observe that I'm still in the model line tool. I have the draw toolbox up here. I could choose a different shape and I could continue drawing. So if I really want to cancel out of this command fully, I need to click on the modify tool over here. That does it. And it brings us back to the ribbon where we see all these tools. So I've succeeded now in my first task, which was to draw a horizontal line 27 feet long. So as I said, I want to create a golden rectangle, right? Well, what is that? It's a rectangle that has the proportion of 1 to 1.618. So if the 1 is 27 feet, then the golden ratio we'll have to calculate. And I have my trusty calculator here. So if I were to type in 27 feet, and I want to multiply that by 1.618 approximately, which is the golden ratio, and I'll multiply those numbers, and we get something that's 43.686. I'm going to round that off and call it 44 feet. I need to draw a line going up here 44 feet high. I'll go back to model line, and I'm going to start this right here at the endpoint. And the endpoint is represented here by this magenta square. And this is an example of something called object snap. And if I move the cursor along the line, the symbol changes. It's a magenta X. And this represents the nearest snap. Nearest means it's somewhere along this edge. It's on the edge, but it could be anywhere really. And if I move the cursor over more, at some point, we're going to see the midpoint symbol, which is an equilateral triangle. And so each object snap has a different symbol that you'll become familiar with in time. And what I want to do is actually click when the endpoint is visible. And that will ensure that I've precisely connected this segment with the endpoint of the existing line. And now as I move the cursor around, you can see that I can specify the length and the angle. What I want to do is bring the cursor over here until it kind of pops into vertical, and it's 90 degrees. And then I want to specify this as 44 feet. So I'm going to move this up, and I might need to navigate. I might need to zoom or pan by rolling the mouse wheel. And the mouse wheel is so important in Revit that if you don't have a mouse with a wheel, you should go out and buy one. It's really critical for getting the most out of Revit. So here I'm going to go up to 44 feet, and then I'll click to specify the second endpoint of my line. And because we're in chain mode, we can continue drawing. And as I move the cursor over here, observe that right here, we have this inference line. This is a little bit like SketchUp and how it works, in that we have this dashed cyan line inferring the point below. So I can just click here, and then I can come down here and complete the rectangle. And because I've completed the boundary, it automatically terminates the chain. And I'm still in the model line tool. So I can click modify to get out of that. And so now I've succeeded in my aim of creating a golden rectangle. And this will be the floor plan or footprint of my residence. So this is at some arbitrary point, right? It's just kind of wherever it is. And what I'd like to do next is center that on these reference planes. So what I'm going to do is select the rectangle. So there are many different ways to select, and I'd like to go over some of them with you right now. So the most obvious way to select is to click on something. But if I click on another something, the first thing I clicked is deselected. So I can only click on and select one thing at a time. If I want to select multiple elements, I need to hold down the control key. And observe that when I hold down the control key, there's a tiny plus symbol that appears on the cursor. When I click on additional elements, they are added to something called the selection set. If I hold down the shift key, a tiny minus symbol appears. So I could remove something from my selection set. So in this way, you can build up a set of items that are selected by kind of painstakingly selecting them one at a time. Now, fortunately, it's not that tedious in Revit. You just have to learn different ways to do things to get things done more efficiently. So another way to select this rectangle is to position the cursor over one of its edges and press the Tab key, and that will select the entire chain of walls or lines that are connected. Then I can just click to select that entire chain, no matter how many segments it has. So you could have a really complicated outline, and it would select the entire boundary just by pressing Tab. So that's a much more efficient way to go. I'll click off to the side to deselect. Now, let's say I wanted to select with a window. Rather than clicking right on the object, I'm going to drag a window around this from left to right. As this window extends beyond that object, you'll see that it highlights. And so this kind of window will only select objects that are completely enclosed within the window. And so this is the normal behavior of selecting things that are inside your window. Now, if you drag your window from right to left, the border of the window is dashed. And this indicates a crossing window. And it's going to select anything that this window crosses over. And so I'm not only selecting the model lines, but I'm also selecting the reference planes. And that's not what I want to do. But I wanted to show you that there are different kinds of windows. So depending on whether you drag from left to right or right to left, it's going to change the behavior of your window and how it works. So in this case, I could just make a window around all of that, and it selects all of the model lines, but it does not select these reference planes because the reference planes go beyond it. All right, now I've selected my rectangle. We're seeing these temporary dimensions appear that are giving us a sense of how far this is away from the reference planes in each direction. I'm just going to disregard that for now, but we'll revisit temporary dimensions later. But now I'd like to move this rectangle, and I could position the cursor over this and just drag it to move it kind of roughly, but I want to be precise. I want to get this lined up with the reference planes. So I need to use a tool for that. I can't just drag it. I'll never get it right where I want it by eyeballing it. So what we do is we use these tools over here in the Modify section of the Modify tab. And while you have a selection, it's lit up here. If I deselected, there is a Modify tab with these same tools, which I can use. But if I use this tool here on the Modify tab, the first thing it needs to know to make a selection, it needs to know what to modify. It says click to select, tab for alternatives, and so on. And that message that appeared in the tooltip is also down here on the status bar. So you can read it down here. And it's important when you're first learning Revit, especially, to read what it says on the status bar, because it will give you a clue about what Revit is looking for. So evidently what it's looking for is for me to select something to modify. So I would have to select this stuff, and then I could modify it. And I'd have to press Enter or space, finish my selection, and then I could actually move it. Now, we could do it that way, but perhaps a more intuitive approach is simply to make your selection, and then you're implicitly in a modify mode. Then I can move whatever I've already selected. So what does the status bar say now? It says, click to enter move start point. What does that mean? It means click somewhere, and you're going to start moving. And now I can see that I'm moving this stuff. And now what does the status bar say? It says, click to enter move endpoint. So if I click some other point, the move is now complete. So a move means to start and end. You have a selection and you start moving it and you end moving it. And where you click determines how far that thing will be moved. So if we want to be precise here, we need to pick it up from not some arbitrary point, but a specific point. So if I move this selection now, I'm going to pick it up from the midpoint here, and I'm going to place that right on this reference plane, anywhere along its edge. So I'm snapping to nearest. So in this way, I've kind of slid it over so that it's centered now on the vertical reference plane. I need to follow this up now with another move. I'll pick this up from the midpoint and I'll move it down to this intersection point. What's the intersection? It's the intersection of the model line and the horizontal reference plane. That's what they're talking about with the intersection. And so now I've finally centered my golden rectangle on the reference planes. And we can actually see that here in the temporary dimensions. They're equal 22, 22, 13 foot 6, 13 foot 6. Great. So mission accomplished. I've drawn my residential footprint, basically. And because this is important to me, I don't want to inadvertently move it or change it in any way. So what I'm going to do is select it and lock it by clicking the push pin here. And that puts locks on each one of those edges, and you can see those with these little red push pins. And I could unlock that just by clicking on the push pin, but I'm going to leave it alone. And that means that if I were to come in here and select this and try to drag it, it's not going to let me move it at all because it's locked. If I really wanted to move it, I could unlock it, and then I could move it, and we'd be back where we were before. So I do want that to be locked. It's not a security feature, it's just a convenience to give you one level of like having to unlock it if you actually want to move it. Okay, so I feel like a sense of accomplishment that I've done something, and there's much more to this, all these different model lines, the modification tools that I discuss in the full course. So if you want to delve deeper, I have this comprehensive Revit Architecture Beginners course available, which is linked in the description of this video. You should check it out. But for now, let's continue, and I'd like to draw my first walls. So I'll go to the Architecture tab and click on the Wall tool. And when you draw a wall, the first thing you do is select what type of wall you want to draw. And you do that in this Type Selector drop-down menu, and that's this big user interface element right here on the Properties palette. When I click on that, you get a long scrolling list of different types of walls you can put in. And all of these different types were set up in the template. And they have kind of a lot of the categories you might want to start with, but I think mostly you'll be adapting these to your own purposes. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with the generic 12-inch wall. And my game plan here is to actually have a very thick wall, which is going to be a signature design element of this project. And so I'm going to start with the generic 12-inch wall, but I'm going to thicken that and define the structure of that wall later. For right now, I want to draw in my walls on top of this golden rectangle. And I want to specify some of the things before I draw the walls over here in the Properties palette. So firstly, the location line, we have these different options here of how we draw the wall. Do we want to draw it down the center of the wall, down the center of the core of the wall? The core defines the structure of the wall, the things that actually bear loads. Or do you want to draw that along the finished face of the wall, exterior or interior? Or do you want to draw that on the core's exterior or interior? In my case, I want to go with the exterior, the finished face exterior. And by choosing that, it's the same thing up here. This is the same menu on the options bar as what we see over here, repeated. And then here, we're going to have the wall start on level 1. And by default, it's saying it's unconnected, it's 20 feet high. Well, I actually want to have that go up to some level. So I'll change this to up to level 2. We also have the ability to put in offsets on the base and on the top. So if, let's say we wanted to have a wall that started 2 feet above level 1 and go 1 foot below level 2, we could enter those values here with positive or negative numbers here and here. In my case, again, just 0, 0 is what I want. And now I'll use the rectangle tool here in the draw toolbox, and I'll click these 2 opposite corners on my golden rectangle to draw in my walls. And then I'll go to modify to end the command. Let's look at this in 3D by clicking on the house icon up here on this user interface element. This is called the quick access toolbar up here. So if I click on the house icon, it shows us a 3D view. And that is shown here in the browser right here, 3D. All right, now we're looking at this in an isometric viewpoint, and we can see that here in this user interface element called the view cube. This thing here, the view cube, is in many of Autodesk's programs. You'll find the same user interface element in AutoCAD and 3ds Max and many other programs. So the idea being that you learn how to use it in one program and you'll be right at home in the other programs because it's the same. So the way that you can use this is by clicking on these different little elements. Like I can click here and it will rotate around into these different vantage points. I could click right on the top and it would look at a top view. I could rotate that. I could look at a front view by clicking on this arrow. I could go back to an isometric view by clicking there. I can drag this ring to pivot. And so you can use it like that, but you can also just hold down the shift key and drag the mouse wheel to orbit. And I tend to favor that method. So all of my navigation is done by rolling the mouse wheel to zoom, dragging the mouse wheel to pan, and holding down the shift key and dragging the mouse wheel to orbit. And that combination gives me just about everything I need to visualize an object from outside the object. Now, when we're navigating inside an interior space, we'll use different tool set called the steering wheel, which is quite useful. You'll see that later. But for now, just play around with the way that you can navigate in 3D space here until you're comfortable enough with looking at the project from different angles. So we're seeing the walls all right, and we're seeing just a green line here representing the model line, which it occupies the same space as the wall. And we're also seeing these things called levels, and they're quite large. And if I zoom in over here, you'll see that we have level 1 at 0. This is the elevation, 0. And this is the elevation of level 2. Okay. Now these levels are really big in comparison with the building itself. So what I'm tempted to do is go back to level 1 by clicking on the tab, zooming out. I'm going to turn on my crop region, and this controls how big the levels are. So what I can do here is bring this in closer to the building. But as I do that, observe that I no longer see that elevation symbol. So before I crop that out, what I'm going to do is select that and move it in. And if I want to keep that lined up, if I just drag it, I'm losing that. So undo. One way you can move things is by using the arrow keys. And this is called nudging. So if I press the right arrow key, it's going to nudge that. If I hold down Shift and use the right arrow key, it's going to nudge that quicker. If I use the up arrow, it's going to nudge it, left arrow, down arrow. So it's going to nudge it in this orthogonal way. And this ends up being quite useful because I can quickly select these elements and just nudge them closer to the building without having to worry about getting them, off axis, off the reference planes. This here is the working section, and I can click on it, and then there's little grips here I can use to drag these in closer, like that. And then I can crop this down tighter to the scope of my project, basically, which is smaller. Then I can turn off the crop region. And now when I go back here, well, we don't see them any smaller here, unfortunately. So what we need to do is drag these over manually, like so. And we'll do the same thing here. And we can line these up exactly if we look in an elevation. So let's check that out. I'll go over into an elevation, let's say the east elevation, and you'll see the levels here. And if I want to line them up, I can use this little grip here on the right where the circle, it has a tiny like kind of small circle right here. That's the grip that you use to drag this. And in this way I can resize these planes to be closer to my building. Now I'd like to change the height of level 2. I think 12 feet is a little high for a residence. So I'm going to change this value here by clicking on the number, and I'll type in 10, enter. In imperial units, when you enter an integer without indication of feet or inches, Revit is going to assume that you're talking about feet. So if I type 10, enter, it means 10 feet. In metric, when you type in an integer, it's going to assume that you mean millimeters. So if you want 2 meters, you would type in 2000, enter. Or you could type in 2m, or 2 meters, explicitly. And so as I change this value, observe that the walls go with it. And that's because the walls are set to go up to level 2, wherever level 2 is. And so this kind of highlights something about Revit, and that is everything is interconnected. This is very important. Any change that you make in any view will affect the entire model. So just by changing the elevation of a level can have a very dramatic effect on the project. So be careful about that, especially later in your design process. So you need to be aware of what you're doing so you don't break things. But at this early stage, it makes sense to kind of sketch out the height of our levels. And, later on, we might change our mind. Maybe we want the ceilings to be at, lower. We want this to be at 9 feet rather than 10. And we can make that change later if we want to. Nothing is ever fixed here. We can keep changing our minds and revising. That's the whole idea of Revit. It's making revisions over and over again. All right, we'll go back to 3D, and you can see now we have kind of brought our levels in closer to the kind of scope of what we're working on, and it makes more sense for our project. Okay, so now how am I going to turn this into my house? Well, I have some ideas in mind. I'd like to have the elevation be kind of like the archetypal house shape. It'll have a gable roof, it'll have a chimney, it'll be like a child sketch of a house in the elevation, but I'd like it to be really modern in other ways. So we'll explore that as we go through this video series. Continuing on, I'd like to now design the wall itself. Like at this moment, I just used a generic 12-inch wall. I'm going to press Tab to chain select all the walls, click to select them all, and then over here, I'm going to edit the type of wall. So right now it's generic 12-inch. I'll edit that type, and this opens up a dialog box, and you may or may not see the preview here. I'm going to close that for now by clicking on this preview button. All right, now in here we have the family, which is all walls are part of the system family. That's something that's built into Revit. And there are different kinds of system families in Revit. There's the basic wall, there's the stacked wall, which is a stack of basic walls, and there's the curtain wall, which is something that we'll explore later. And within these families, we have types. We have a lot of different types to choose from in this template. But you're not limited to the types that are in the template, of course. You can make your own. So in my case, what I want to do is make my own. So I'll take this generic 12-inch one and duplicate it. And this is a best practice. You should never change what's there. You should make a duplicate of it and then change that so that the original remains unaltered. Maybe you want to use a generic 12-inch wall in the future and you don't want to mess it up. So just duplicate it, and then you won't have any conflict. So in this duplicate, I'm going to name it something meaningful for my project. So let's type in project and then dash and call it exterior wall. Now, if you were in a specific project, it might have a name or an acronym or maybe your company name you put here. You'd substitute that for the word project. So for example, I could say SourceCAD dash exterior wall. And in this way, I can alphabetize all of the walls that I make on my own. They'll always be prefaced with this project name, SourceCAD. And so that way I can more readily identify them in this long list. So imagine that by the end, I have several different wall types. They'll all be prefaced with the word SourceCAD. And so that way I can pick them out from this long list. All right. Now I'll click under structure. I'm going to click edit. And this is a very important dialog box right here because this allows us to edit the assembly. These are the subcomponents inside the wall. These are the things that the wall is made up of. And they're organized into layers. And so we have, it says layers right here, notice? There's 3 layers right now, and 2 of them are kind of analytical. We have these core boundaries on either side of this structure layer. So you can put layers inside the core boundary or outside the core boundary. And the core boundary defines the structure. That is the thing that holds the wall up, that bears a load. Anything that's load bearing should go inside the core boundary. Anything that's like a finish or a substrate or something like that would go outside of the core boundary. And then we have the exterior side of the wall on this up here, and then we have the interior side at the bottom. And we can kind of visualize that with the preview. So if I open up the preview, there's 2 different modes. There's the floor plan mode and the section mode. I like the section mode. It has some more options that aren't available in the floor plan mode. So I'm going to select that here. And then the sample height, this is the sample of this preview. I'm going to make it shorter. Let's call it 4 feet. And then I can navigate over here. I can roll the mouse wheel. I can drag the mouse wheel, get a better look at that. So right now it's monolithic. There's just one layer called structure. It's 1 foot thick. So to make this real, we have to kind of put in some real things. So instead of this just being a generic 1 foot thick element, I'm going to put in a 2x6. So 2x6 is actually 5.5 inches thick. So how do I specify that? In imperial units, you separate the feet from the inches with spaces. And if you put in another space to separate the inches from the fractions of an inch. So this means 0 feet, 5 inches, and 1/2 inch. When I press enter, Revit's going to format that. It's going to say 0 feet, space, 5, space, 1/2 inches. So the / indicates the fraction. So the numerator and the denominator are on either side of the slash. So I've specified the thickness of a 2x6, but how do I know it's a 2x6? Well, you do that with the material. Click on this, and then click on the little ellipsis button here. And that opens up the material browser, which you can resize. And the material browser is organized with all of the materials that are in your project up here. And if I type in, I'm going to see all the wood materials in my project. And also down here, I'm going to see all of the wood materials that are in the library. And there are many. So I could scroll through here and find something that makes sense for, might be pine, but it looks like I already have pine loaded in my project. If I didn't, I could click the up arrow here and that would load it in. So for example, if I had a desire to use this other one, I could load it in my project by clicking this arrow, and then it shows up in my project up above. It has knots in it. The regular pine material has less knots in it, really. So I don't know. I'll just use plain old pine and click OK. There it is. And this gives me a sense of what this thing is. It's a 2x6. And it performs the function of structure. That's true. It's load bearing. I'll click on layer 2 now and insert another layer above that. And this is going to be another 2x6, believe it or not. It will also be pine. Okay? And in between those, I'd like to have a layer of insulation. And this is acting more like a spacer. I want a really thick wall here. So I'm going to click on layer 3 and insert a layer in between those. And this is going to be 5 inches thick. And the material will be rigid insulation. We can see that now. We're starting to make sense of this section view. So we have pine, rigid insulation, another layer of pine, and those are all inside the core of the wall. Now, I'd like to build some layers outside of the core. So I'll click on layer 1 and insert a layer above that. And this is going to have a thickness of, let's say, 1/2 inch. And the material will be furring, metal furring. It's like a metal element that we can attach something to, all right? And this is going to have a function of substrate. The rigid insulations function will be a thermal air layer. Okay, so I'll click layer 1 and insert a layer above that. And this will be the actual exterior cladding of the building, which I think will be a kind of stucco. I'll type in stucco up here, and I see that I don't have any stucco materials currently in the project, so I can look through the library and see what's available. Let's take a look at this one here, the wall texture stucco stipple appearance, and you can see it's got a rough appearance, which I like. I'm gonna go with that. I'll load that into my project by clicking the up arrow, and then I can click OK. And the thickness will be, let's say, 1/2 inch. The function will be finish 1. All right, there it is. So the stucco, the furring, the 2x6, the insulation, another 2x6, and on the other side of the core boundary, I'd like to have some more furring and a layer of gypsum board. So I'll click layer 7 and say insert. Whenever you insert, it always inserts that above whatever you have selected. So in this case, I want to move layer 7 down. I'll click down, and it moves that down below the core boundary. Here I'm going to put in furring. That will be 1/2 inch. And the function will be a substrate. And then I'll add another layer and move it down. And this will be gypsum board. And I'll just say that's 1/2 inch. And the function will be finish 2. So typically finish 1 is reserved for exteriors and finish 2 is interiors, although that's just a rule of thumb. So now I've really specified the kind of composition of my wall in all of these different layers. And up here you can see the total thickness, it's all of these things added up, is 1'6". And that's what I'm looking for. Say OK, OK again, and the walls have gotten thicker here. So now I've made these walls sort of real. They're no longer just generic walls, they're specific walls. Great. Now let's consider how we want the elevation to appear. So I'd like this to have kind of a typical house shape with a gable roof. So let's think this through. I'd like to have 2 levels in the project and then the roof. So in this project, I'm going to go into the east elevation, and I'd like to have another level. So I'll click on level 2 and copy that from here, moving it up 4 feet. And it automatically names it level 3, but I don't want it to be called level 3 here. This is going to be called spring line. I have this in mind. I'm just going to call it spring line. And the elevation marker is white, not blue. And that's because this is just a level. It doesn't correspond to a view. If we wanted to make this into a view, we could, and we would see another element over here called spring line. But I don't really want to have a floor plan called spring line. This is something that is used to help me design the roof. Now, yeah, I think that's going to do it for me. And I'd like these walls to go up to the spring line. So I'm going to position the cursor over the wall and press the Tab key to select the entire chain, and then click. And then I can change the top constraint to spring line. And just like that, the walls pop up. So my second floor is going to be here at level 2, but the walls now are sticking up above that. Let's look at this in level 2. I'll go to level 2. So I'm seeing on level 2, I'm seeing the walls because they're coming up above level 2. I'm able to see them here. Now I'd like to build a roof. So I use the roof tool. And the roof tool has many different options, and we go over more of them in the full course. So you should check that out, and it's linked in the description of this video. But for now, we're just going to create a roof by footprint, and that is always built in a plan view like this one. And I'd like the base level of this roof to not be level 2, but actually be at the spring line. And this roof will be a rectangle shape, so I'll click rectangle in the draw toolbox. And I'm sketching the boundary lines of this roof. And the boundaries are going to be on the exterior of the wall like this. And then I'll go to modify. And we're still in this mode. Even though I've clicked on modify, we're still in this mode until we either cancel or confirm. And right now we're seeing these symbols on the lines that represent the slope of the roof. So what I'm going to do is select all of that. When I make a selection in this mode, I'm only able to select my sketch elements, not other things. That's why everything else is grayed out. So this is common in Revit. You'll be in these modes like this where you're sketching something. And while you're there, the sketch itself will be magenta and everything else will be grayed out. And so you just need to focus in on the magenta stuff. That's what you're able to edit. Now I'm going to select all these lines, and over here I'll say defines roof slope. I'll uncheck that. That's going to remove those little symbols. And then I want to specifically select this edge and this one. So I'm going to hold down the control key to select them both. And then I want those two edges to define a slope, and that's why we're seeing these symbols now. What slope do we want? I want a very steep 12-inch rise and a 12-inch run. In other words, the 45-degree angle. Okay, I'll accept that. Now let's look at that in 3D. So we have a roof that has a 45-degree angle, and it is perfectly fitting the footprint of the walls. Now I want this roof to kind of match the thickness of the walls. Believe it or not, I want it to be a really thick roof. So I'm going to edit this type, and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'll call it SourceCAD-roof. What kind of roof is this? It's the standard roof. Okay. And then the structure, it's going to have the same kind of thing as the wall. But this is a roof, so we have to kind of replicate it here. So the structure is going to be composed of a 2x6. Actually, not a 2x6 because we're dealing with loads. This is going to be maybe a 2x12, something like that. I'm not going to specify all of the layers of the roof at this stage. I can always do that later. So just to keep things simple, I'm going to call this 1 foot 4. 1 foot 4. And then I'd like to have an inch above that of something that will be the exterior cladding of the roof. Let's see if we have some shingles. Yes, we have already a material in the project we can use. And then here I'd like to create another layer and move it down. And then this one will be an inch so that we have a total of a 1 foot 6 inch thick roof. And this will typically be a gypsum board inside, I suppose. And the function will be finish 2. The function of the asphalt shingle will be finish 1. Okay, that's fine. And I will say okay. And there's the roof. It's thicker now. All right, now what about these end walls? I want them to go up to meet that, right? So how do we do that? I select this wall and say attach top base, and then click on the roof. That's it. Now over here, we have a little issue where this is cut out. This is a glitch, actually. Shouldn't be. So what I can do is select this wall and say attach top base to the roof, and it goes up to it now. That solved the problem. On the other side, we need to attach that. And it looks like this wall needs to be attached as well. Great. Now, let's look at this in a different mode where we can see the textures. I can go to textures mode or realistic mode, which involves some lighting. So I can see at least the shingle material. And we have a line here, which I want to get rid of. So let's see, if I select the wall and join it with the roof, sometimes that will eliminate lines. Not so in this case. So I'd like to hide that line. I don't want to see that line. How can I do that? And I want the materials to be the same on both. So we have two problems we need to solve. Firstly, I guess we should talk about the material. So this wall has a stucco material on the exterior. I go into realistic mode, it's all the same color. In textures mode, they differ. So I would like to get this stucco material on the exterior of the roof, essentially. So I'll go to the Modify tab, and I'd like to paint. I'll click on this little icon here, which is like the symbol of the material going onto an element. And the way that this works is you select your material, and what I want here is stucco. It's this one, wall texture stucco. And what I want to do is to have this surface highlight the gable end, not the underside of the roof. So I'll press the tab key, and I'll keep pressing the tab key until the right thing highlights, and then I can click, and the paint will be applied to the correct surface. So that's a tip that you can kind of use anywhere in Revit. You can select by pressing the tab key to drill down into selecting the item that you want. So you just cycle through the different possibilities at that location by pressing tab. All right, now I finally painted everything the same. And now I'd like to try to join the roof and the wall. And that worked over here. It eliminated the lines. I'll try to join the roof and this wall, and it eliminated the lines. And then join the roof, this wall, and again, the roof and this wall. There we go. So everything is joined except for this. It's a little tricky. This wall and the roof. It's not letting me do that very easily. Sometimes this will happen. So actually glad it happened, because we'll have to solve the problem in a different way. So for some reason, Revit is not really liking me to join these two things together. So how do I solve that problem? Well, I can use the line work tool here. And the line work tool lets you change the way that individual lines are displayed, and you can choose how they're displayed with these categories. So if you want to hide something, you would choose invisible lines. And then you click on that line. And what I've done is I've hidden one of the lines, probably the line representing the wall. There's still a line representing the roof. I need to click on it a second time to hide that one. And then over here, it looks like there's a line on the top of the wall I could hide. And again, from the roof. And then I've finally hidden them all. We're seeing kind of a little hint that there's something there with that very tiny dotted line in there, but I don't think we can hide that. But we've cleaned it up quite a lot. So what I'd like to do is take this roof and extend it out. I want to be on the front of the building over here. I want this to say front facing me. And I would like to extend the roof out, let's say 7 feet out. So I can edit the footprint of the roof, select this edge, and I'd like to move that edge from this midpoint out 7 feet. Accept that. And now we have an overhang. Great. Now I'd like these walls on either side to extend out to meet it. So I can use the Align tool here. And the way that the Align tool works is you first click on the edge that you're going to align to. This is the edge that will remain where it is. So I'm going to click on this front surface of the roof. And then the next thing that you click on will be the object that will be transformed and aligned, moved. So I'm going to click on this wall here. Click on the roof. And then what I need to do is press the tab key. Oh, it's just proving stubborn. This is not uncommon. So what I'm going to do instead is go to level 1, select this wall, and pull it out by grabbing this grip and pulling it out. And then I can go in 3D, and now that it's broken out of the perimeter of the wall, I can use the line now probably successfully. I can align there to there. Again, click and click, and they're lined up. Great. Now, here we have an issue. So we're seeing gypsum board on the exterior of the building, and that's not what I want. And we're also seeing some intersections here that I don't want either. So let's see if we can join these together. No, it's not letting me. So if join is not available, and it's not always available, I guess we can't join them because they have different materials for one thing. So what I could do is paint this with the stucco, and now let's see if that is enough to allow me to join them. Still no. Well, I can use the line work tool to eliminate this particular edge. There we go. That's the look I'm going for, something really clean like that. All right. The inside of this is an exterior feature. It has to be weatherproofed. So I'm going to use a specific material for that, right? And what do I want to use? Well, I have a product in mind. So let me show you. Okay, I have this idea to use this New Tech wood, which is a product that has this recycled plastic and wood fiber product that has this nice European look to it with these nice black reveals with the wood texture. I like it. And so here I can go to resources, 3D textures, and I can find siding. And then the Norwegian siding is extra thin and the Belgian is a little bit thicker. And then you can choose the kind of siding you want. I'm going to go with teak. And then you can download this material, which I've already done. And let me just show you what that particular thing looks like. I have a folder here of texture maps that I'm using in this project. And we have these long, thin files. And I'll just open up a preview image of that. You can see the texture map is very long and thin, and it has these lines in it. And so this is something that you could make in Photoshop or just download a texture map from the internet. And this is, the texture map I'm going to be using for the project. So if I wanted to do that, I need to make a material. And you do that under Manage Materials. And then we can make a new material right here. Create new material. And the new material, I can rename that and call it Belgian wood siding. And on the Appearance tab, I can select an image that I'm going to use for the texture map. And that is going to be this image in here. New Tech wood, Peruvian teak. It's going to be this wider one, 7.7 by 192. So those dimensions are in millimeters, but we can use the proportion, imperial units, just the same. So let's remember 7.7 by 192. All right. So then to set the proportion, you go here and go to Edit Image and unconnect the scales here and say the width is 7.7 inches by 192 inches. You see? And then we can rotate it. If we wanted it to run horizontally, we could rotate this 90 degrees. Let's see what that would look like. It runs that way. Okay. Okay, again. So now I have a material that exists in my project. Go to the Modify tab and go to the Paint tool and search for Belgian. Here's my material. And I don't click down, I leave that open. And then I can click on this to apply it. But unfortunately, what that's going to do is it's going to color that entire surface, you see, which is not what I want. So I'm going to undo that. So before I color that entire surface, I need to split it. And that's this tool here, Split Face. And so what we do is we click on the face first to identify the face you want to split. And then you're in a sketch mode. So then you can sketch a line right there that represents your split line, and then accept. And that effectively splits those faces. So I can go back to Paint, type in Belgian, and paint this. And it just affects that one part of the wall. All right, let's do the same thing on the other side over here. So I can split face, click on this surface, sketch in a line. And while I'm at it, why don't I split the roof as well? So I can click on this, split face, this surface. Now, in terms of the roof, we need to split all the way across from here, not just to there, but all the way to the other edge. If you don't go all the way, it won't split it. All right. And then over here, split face, click on this surface, here to there, accept, paint. There's the material, there, and there. So, looks great. Now, we have part of the building done. But what about this surface here? I don't want this to be a thick wall. In fact, I want this to be a curtain wall. I'd like to have a chimney running up through the building in this location. So I'll go to level 1, and I know that I don't want this giant wall here, so I'm just going to delete that. And I know I want to have a chimney element here, so I'll create a wall, and it's going to be maybe a generic 8-inch wall for the time being. It will be a rectangle, and I'm going to build it off to the side and then move it into position. And let's say it's 3 feet by 6 feet. Then I can take this and move it to the reference plane and move it again to this model line. My idea is the curtain wall will be like lining up with this green line representing the golden rectangle, and the chimney will stick out halfway outside the building, and it will be halfway inside the building. All right. Now, how high is this going to go up to? Well, in this case, I don't want it to go up to a specific level. I want it to be unconnected, and the height, let's say it's 33 feet. What does that look like in 3D? Like that. Great. I'd like to have some kind of masonry look on the outside. So maybe it's not a basic wall. Let's see what other types we have available. We have generic walls. We have concrete. None of that's really doing it for me. I think I'm going to have to adapt this by maybe this masonry one here. Let's see, what does that look like? 8-inch masonry. That's much better. That's what I'm looking for. Something like that. Okay. Now observe that the chimney just pokes up through the roof, right? But we don't see lines here or there. To make that happen, we need to join these elements. So we go to Modify, Join, select this wall and then the roof. And then we select this wall and the roof. And we just work our way around doing that. And when you join elements, Revit knows that it needs to create lines of intersection between them. And so that's looking much better already. All right, now the next step might be to build a floor. And let's put that on level 1, architecture, floor. I'll go with the generic 12-inch floor for now. Rectangle from here all the way over to, let's say, here. And then accept. Look at that in 3D. So we have a floor underneath the building. And then we're going to have some kind of material out here. And that could be a different floor object if we wanted to have different materials. Or we could, just extend this, edit the boundary, and drag this over, and it will actually snap to that. And we could, split the face if we needed to have different materials. So what about that? What about a material? Now, I've collected a bunch of maps in my project, and I'm going to use this kind of NewTek wood. Again, NewTek has flooring materials, and I like this parquet design, which I found on their website. So I'm going to design a material for that. Go to Manage, Materials, make a new material, and let's rename that and call it parquet flooring. Texture map is going to be 90-degree pattern. So I've created a material. And then I can assign that to this floor. Now I could do that by painting it on the surface, or I could alter this floor type, go into the structure, and I could add a layer on the top. Say it's 1/2 inch thick. And let's give it the material of the parquet flooring, and its function is finished layer. It's going to actually thicken the floor a little bit, and then we have that material shown. Now, I think it's too small. I'd like it to be bigger than that. So I can go into the materials and edit this and change this and boost this up to a larger size. I don't know. Let's call it 3 feet and see how that looks. I think that's too big. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to go with 2 feet. So I'll click on the texture map and then change that to 2 feet. All right, I'm happy with that. I'll go with that. The second floor, let's do that. So I'll go to level 2, and the second floor can easily be made. And We could have a different material on this, in which case we would have to edit the type, duplicate it, and call it something different. I'll call this one, and I can come in here and change this to something else. Now, I don't really know what I'm going to use up there, but let's just, maybe it's going to be carpet. Let's see. I'll start with just a simple carpet here. Maybe this one, Berber. Okay. And okay. Rectangle. And this time, the floor, instead of clicking on the inside, I'm going to use this tool here, which is called Pick Walls. And that's going to draw this into the inner face of the core, which is really where you want your floor to go. You don't want your floor to end right at the gypsum board. You want it to actually penetrate into the core of the wall. And so that's where this is handy, Pick Walls. If you notice, the magenta line is inset a bit from the finished face of the wall. And then this tool here, Pick Lines, lets you literally pick lines off of the model like this. And whenever you're in a sketch mode like this, you'll see everything else grayed out and the lines that you're sketching in magenta. And you just need to create a closed boundary. So this isn't going to work as it stands. We have lines, and typically what we do is we use this tool right here, Trim Extend to Corner. And the way that that tool works, and the keyboard shortcut is TR for trim, is you click on the two edges, 1, 2, and they're joined in a corner. It's like AutoCAD's Fillet 0 command, if you're familiar with that. You click on two edges and they're joined in a corner. And it depends, what you get depends on where you click the lines. So if I were to click this line here, and then this one here, it joins them in the corner all right. But because I click this line down here, it's going to leave that segment. That's not really what I wanted, though. If I click this one and this one up here, they get joined together. And if I click this line up here and this one down here, then the parts that I click are the parts that will remain in the end. That's how you use trim. Trim is used all the time when you're sketching. It's the primary way that you connect things together. I'll accept that. And we get these questions typically when we make a floor. The floor, roof, or topo solid overlaps the highlighted walls. Would you like to join geometry and cut the overlapping volume out of the walls? Generally, you say yes to this. You don't want the objects to overlap. You want the floor to cut out a chunk out of the wall. And we can see that later when we're detailing, when we're looking at the way that the floor and the wall come together in a detail, you'll see that they join together in that way. All right, now one thing I notice is that the floor goes right through the chimney, and that's not good. So I need to edit the boundary of the floor. And then I need to pick walls and pick these. Now these walls, the core extends all the way to the exterior. So there's no difference between pick walls and pick lines in this particular case. And so here we have a single line that runs all the way through here, but I know I'm going to need to cut it. So I'll use this tool here, Split Element. And I'll click 1, 2 to split that. And then I can use Trim Extend to Corner, or TR for short, on the keyboard. And I can trim these together to form a new boundary that excludes the chimney. Accept. Again, yes. And there we have it. Let's look at that in 3D. So now we have a floor up there that has carpet on top of it. Now, the front of the floor has concrete, but that is something that we're going to hide with the curtain wall that we're going to build now. Now let's build the curtain walls here. So to do that, we have to recognize that curtain walls are walls, and they're going to be on the wall tool, and they're located down here. And there's 3 different kinds. There's exterior glazing, storefront, and not defined. And exterior glazing and storefront have sort of spatial grids set up in them, and they're useful for larger curtain walls that go across an entire facade. In our case, we're going to build the curtain wall from scratch. So I'm going to use the not defined type, and I'm going to edit that and then rename it and call it SourceCAD curtain wall. And what they mean by not defined is that nothing in here is defined. It all says none. You'll find that the other styles, like if I were to select exterior glazing here, you'll see that it's already set up with a vertical grid and a horizontal grid. And the storefront has some other things specified like the mullions and so on. And again, these are useful for larger curtain walls, but I'm going to be building it from scratch. So I'm going to use this one here that has nothing defined at all. Okay, so what does that mean to have a curtain wall with nothing defined? Well, I'll show you. Here on level 1, I'm going to draw in the curtain wall from here to here. And it says elements have duplicate type mark values. That's fine. That doesn't matter at this stage. I'll go to modify, click on the curtain wall. And this is called the flip grip, and it shows the exterior part of the wall. So it's on the wrong side. I need to click that. And then the arrows show on the opposite side. And that means that's the exterior. That's what I want. So right now we're just seeing a panel in there by default. So I'll look back in 3D and take a look at that. So this is the curtain wall, and it's not big enough yet. I need it to go all the way up. And in fact, I want that curtain wall to attach to the roof. And what should happen there is the curtain wall will be cut back to work with that roof. And yeah, I don't want it to go up to level 2. I want it to be unconnected. I want to attach that to the roof. It's not doing it. Edit profile. It removes the top and base attachments. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is pick lines by picking this line off of the interior of the roof. And then I'll trim this together. And we have a stray line up here that we have to erase. And then accept. And it can't keep things joined. I'm going to unjoin it from the roof. That's fine. But now we're seeing the curtain wall has a slightly different representation. It kind of suggests that it's sketched in properly. All right, so we have a curtain wall that's just a kind of placeholder at the moment. Go to Architecture, Curtain Grid, and I'm going to move the cursor along this lower edge. And at some point, it's going to positively pop into position there. And that's going to be where these are at the midpoint. So I'll click once there to place in a grid line. And then I'm going to move the cursor along this edge. And at some point, it's going to pop right and snap to that floor. When I click there, it actually puts in a horizontal grid line there. And then I want another grid line that's 1 foot down from that. And I can look at the temporary dimension there and verify that it says 1 foot. When I click, it puts in a grid line there as well. And so this is the geometry of this window area. And we're just lining up the grid lines with what we have. So that's stage 2. Stage 1 is build the curtain wall itself. Stage 2 is build the grid lines. Stage 3 is add the mullions. So we're on to mullions here. I'm going to add mullions not just to one grid line at a time or one segment at a time, but I'm going to go and add grid lines everywhere. So all grid lines mode, and then just click on the curtain wall, and we get grid lines everywhere. Undo. So before I do that, maybe I should choose the kind of mullion that I want. Now we have some mullions already loaded. I'll use this second one, which is a little bit smaller. And then I can go to all grid lines and click on that, and mullions that are just a little bit thinner. I think that's going to work wonderfully for us. And so then I can come in here and take a look at what we have. So we have these very bright white mullions, and I'd like to use a dark color instead. So what I need to do is tab. I need to position the cursor over this mullion and tab until I can select an individual mullion like this one, and then edit the type, and then change the material in here to not just shiny aluminum, but maybe something that's dark or black. I have some materials already in the project. We could use this one, or I can use something else from the list. I'm just going to keep it fairly simple, and maybe I'll just choose this appliance steel black. It's metallic, shiny. Maybe it's too shiny for me, so I'm going to increase the roughness. And top coat is going to be rougher. Okay. So just like that, we made them look dark. We have these panels, right? So I'm going to tab and select this panel. And the panel is glazed by default. I'm going to change that by editing the type and selecting solid. And what is the material that I'm going to use? Well, I need to specify that. My panels, I want them to be a color of some kind, maybe green. I'll use load this plastic, and I'm going to duplicate that and rename it and call it green panel, and then edit that in some way. I don't want that to be plastic. Maybe it will be, well, plastic's okay. It will be polished, and that might be better already. So I'll say okay to that. Okay, again, and we're not seeing it. Well, the reason may be because we would see that in a rendering or in realistic mode. There's realistic mode. There's textures mode. So in textures mode, we're not seeing the color. And the reason for that is in textures mode, it's not showing us the color, it's showing us what we see here. So if I check use render appearance, then it will show in green. So it's showing now in the green color, fine. I notice that the panel is sticking out, like protruding beyond the mullions, and that's not good. So what I need to do is select the entire curtain wall, and then let's see if there's a parameter in here that we can change. Edit the type. No, I'm not seeing anything there. Maybe I need to select the panel itself. Edit the type. Here it is, offset. On the panel itself, I don't want to use an offset. And we can specify how thick the panel is here as well. Maybe it doesn't need to be quite so thick. That should take care of it. So now the panel is slightly inset, which was the look I was going for. All right, so now we have panels that kind of cover up the edge of the floor slab above or behind, beyond. And what I need to do is just change these, each one of these to solid, like so. Now let's build another curtain wall over here, but the difference here is that we're going to have a door in the curtain wall that allows us to come out here into this patio area. All right, so I'll go back to level 1, and I see the curtain wall is where it is, centered on that line. Now, maybe I want this to be moved down a bit, right? So what I'm going to do is select the curtain wall. How can I do this? I'm going to use the Align tool. Modify, Align, click on the model line, and then click on the edge of the curtain wall here to move it forward. It's not working. Yeah, so maybe what I need to do is select the curtain wall and then just use the down arrow keys to nudge it down. And if I come way in here and zoom way in, then I'm actually moving it in tiny fractions of an inch. And I want to line that up perfectly with that green line. There we go. So now the curtain wall is flush with the edge of the floor. And I want a similar curtain wall over here. So I'm going to build a new curtain wall using my style, the empty style. And that's going to be drawn right here. And then I need to hit escape a couple of times and flip this over. And then we need to build the curtain wall from here. So I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to edit the profile, this line off of the roof, trim these together, get rid of this line that's now floating. So that's the shape of my curtain wall. So stage 1 is complete. I've put in a curtain wall placeholder and I've changed the profile to match our geometry. Step 2 is to add in curtain grid lines where you need them. So firstly, I know I'm going to want a grid line running right along this edge, right at the floor. It's going to snap there. And I need another one 1 foot below that. And then I'll position the cursor along here. And I don't really know yet, but we can adjust this. I'm just going to place one here at 1'6", and another one that's 3 feet over from that. And then we have this 4'2" and a fraction of an inch. What I'd like to do is kind of figure out where the center is. So this is where I would use a model line, sketch in a segment, and I'm going to right click and choose snap overrides snap mid between 2 points. And then I'll click this point and then this point over here. That will give me the midpoint. And then I can draw a line going the other direction. So this green line represents the mid of this opening. And so I really want this grid line to move over a little bit and be right on that. In fact, I want both of these grid lines to move over a little bit. So how can I do that? I can click on this grid line and move it over just like that. And then I want this to be 3 feet, but it moved it right back, undo. So what I'm going to have to do is maybe do this in a different way. I'm going to select both of these lines by holding down the control key and getting both of them. And then with that selection, I can move them both over and snap that to the midpoint. And in that way, I know I have a grid line running right down the middle. And then we have a 3-foot door and whatever's left over. Okay. Now I'll go to mullion. So we're in stage 3. I have the correct mullion selected. I'll use all grid lines and click on the curtain wall, and they're all put in. Now, I don't want a mullion to be on the bottom of the door. So I'm going to press tab until I can select this one mullion and then delete it, right? The other mullions are fine. If you want certain mullions to go through and not be interrupted, you can select them, like select this one mullion here. And then there's a little grip here. It's hard to see, but if I click on that, this mullion will now penetrate through and take priority over the vertical one. And so you can create these joining conditions where you want this horizontal one to run clear through, or do you want the vertical one to do that? It's up to you. In this case, I'm happy with the vertical ones running all the way through, I guess. So I'll undo, leave that as it was. Now we need to change these panels up here. And in fact, I'm going to make some revisions here. I don't really need to see this little mullion here. I'm going to delete it. I'm going to take this one here and delete it. I'm going to take this panel right here, delete it. Well, actually, I'm not going to delete the panel. I'm going to go back to, I want to select the grid line itself. So there's the grid line. I can select it. And here, add remove segments. When you select a grid line, you can go in this mode, and then whatever you click on gets removed. So here I want to remove this little segment too. What that does is it changes the bay structure of your curtain wall. So now I just have one panel that spans all the way across like that. And now I can tab into that and select that one panel and change its type to solid. And I think that's an improvement, you know. Over here, let's do the same thing. I'll get rid of this one mullion and I'll select this curtain grid line and go to add remove segments and click on that, remove it. And did it work? Not quite. I need to do it again. There, did I get it? It's tricky. There, I got it. So now it healed that division, and now we just have one giant panel there instead. I think that makes more sense. And speaking of that, maybe it makes more sense here to run this mullion here, select that one and click on its grip to have it go up so that this horizontal element goes all the way across. And I'll do the same thing over here. And you know what? Over here, we don't need this division. So I'm going to get rid of that and click on this grid line and remove that as well. And so you can see how easy it is to change the spacing and the number of grid lines that you have and just design the curtain wall that you need in your particular geometric situation. Now down here we want to have a door, not a piece of glass. And in fact, all of these pieces of glass, if you select this panel, you'll see that it's right on the front of the extreme edge of the panel. Maybe it's even sticking over. So if I edit the glazed panel, I can change the offset value here, and the thickness of the glazing is going to be less. And by doing that, the panels recess a bit into the framing and so on. And that happens everywhere because I changed that type. And all of those panels, all of those glazing panels use that same type. Now for this panel here, this is also a glazing panel. I want a door. How do you load a door in a curtain wall? Well, you might be tempted to add a door through the door tool, but you'll find that that doesn't work. The doors that work within curtain walls are special. and they have to be added by selecting the panel, editing the type, and then right here you click load, and then you need to select your door curtain wall, and you go into doors. And what I want is this one here, the door curtain wall single glass family. I'll load that and accept it. And then I probably need to edit the type, change the offset 0, and it looks just like the glass. But if we go into an increased level of detail over here, we can go to Fine. And I know this family was designed so that the door handle only shows up in the fine level of detail. Now, if I select this panel, I can edit the family here. And this is going to open the family file, which is a separate model. And here's the door handle, right? And I can view that in the floor plan view here. And there's 2 different elements which comprise the door handle. So I'm going to select both of those and change the visibility settings in the family to display not just in fine, but also in medium detail level. And then I can load that into the project and close. And then have an option of whether I want to save the family. I don't. I'll say no. But I do want to load this into the project. And when I do that, we have to decide what we want to do. Are we going to overwrite the existing version or overwrite it and its parameter values? I'll just overwrite the existing version. And then I should be able now to go to medium detail level and the door handles still appear. If I go to coarse though, they will disappear. I like that behavior more. So don't be afraid to edit the families that you're using. You don't have to save them into the library. I chose not to save that family. I just chose to edit the family and then load it into my project. In that way, I have a unique copy of that family in my project. If I wanted to save the family file to the library, then that's going to affect everyone in the future who uses that. And so you want to definitely check with your team to see if that's okay. Can you make changes like that that's going to affect everyone going forward? Or should you just make changes to your specific project? You can do so by just loading it into the project without saving the family file. So I hope that makes that a little bit more clear. So now we have our door here in our curtain wall, and we've succeeded in designing that. Now over here, I'd like to have an opening in the wall so we can just like come out this door and walk this way, not have to walk all the way around. So how do I do that? I can select this wall and I'd like to cut into it. There's several ways you can do that, but perhaps the most direct way is simply to edit the profile of the wall. And this removes the top and base attachments prior. Okay, that's fine. Close. And we see the sketch in magenta. Well, I can go ahead and pick lines off of the model. I can pick this line on the front of the curtain wall there, and it puts in this line on the same plane that the sketch is on. And I can also just sketch my own lines. Like I can sketch in a line right here, and you can see that I'm drawing that horizontally. If you want to offset an existing line, you can do that by selecting a line and then using the offset tool up here. And then you specify how far you want it offset right here. So let's say I want this 1'6". That's the thickness of this wall, I remember. So I'm going to offset this line 1'6", and I can do that on either side just by moving the cursor and click on the left side to offset that like that. And then I can trim this together. And whenever you have a sketch like this, it has to be a closed boundary. This isn't going to work as it stands because we have kind of a boundary within a boundary. What we need to do here is use the split element tool to split this down below and then trim this together. So now we actually have a closed boundary. We'll accept that. And there you have cutout. Now, is this right? Is this wrong? We probably need to make some changes. I'll look in level 1, and I can see that this curtain wall isn't quite in the right place. I'm going to nudge it down and zoom way in here, and then nudge it back, and observe that I'm moving in tiny fractions of an inch as I do this. I should be able to get it snapped precisely to that green line just by nudging it. And then over here, I want this wall to come down a little bit more. So I can click on the wall, and to edit the profile, I need to be in a different view. I can't be in the plan view. But I notice that I have some grips here. Maybe I can just move this wall, and that has the effect of editing the profile as well. I might be able to use a line here to align this up like that. Great. Let's take a look in 3D. That's what I was shooting for, something like that. So we see the stucco material wrap around, and it's kind of the way I wanted it. This is more like a column now. However, I'm noticing that we have the wrong material on this surface here, and probably on that surface. So we want stucco there, I believe. I'll go to Paint, Stucco, select it, and paint these surfaces correctly. Yes. This line isn't right. We don't want to see that. Line work, invisible lines, click on that to eliminate it. Great. So it's coming along nicely. Before we actually put in the stair, let's think about how we enter the building. This is like the back door here. I'd like the front door to be over here on the side. So that's easy to do. Go to Architecture tab, Door. Select a door family from the drop-down list. And if you don't see the family that you want, you can always load it by clicking Load Family. And you go into your Doors folder and you find the door that you want, maybe residential. And I'm looking for a door like this one that has glazing. This is a good entry door, I think. I'll open that. And this is called a type catalog. Sometimes you'll see this. This exists as a text file in the same folder as that family. And it is a spreadsheet that shows the different types that are available. In this case, I'd like it to be a wide door, 36 inches wide by 84 inches high, or 7 feet high. Okay. And then I can place that here in the wall. And I'd like that door to open outward. And I can specify where it goes just by clicking. And let's take a look at that in 3D and see if that's going to work for us. It looks good from the outside. I don't see the door handle. To see that, I'd have to go into the fine level of detail. And there you see it. That's controlled in the family itself. So as you saw with the curtain wall panel, if we wanted to change that behavior, we could select this object and edit the family itself if we wanted to change it. I'm happy with it, though. I'm going to leave it. I notice when I select that, I can see through it. And I can see that there's like a transition strip here that's in the wrong location. And that's probably because we have such a massively thick wall here that this family isn't really set up to cope with that. So I might be able to edit the type and adjust some of the parameters maybe to fix that. Let's see. The thickness of, that's the door panel. It really just depends on how the family was designed. I'm not seeing anything just offhand that's going to work. We have height and width. We have thickness of the panel. None of that is going to do it. Maybe what I'll do is edit the family. Take a look in the floor plan. We have this element here, which is the threshold, right? And you know what? I don't even want that. I'm going to delete it. And then load into project and close. I'm not going to save it. I don't want to save that permanently for everyone, so I'll say no. And then I'll overwrite what I have here. And then we no longer have that issue. Now, of course, we could have delved deeper into the design of that family and perhaps solved that problem, but it's more than I want to do at the moment. So there's the door. If I want to design a stair inside, it would be a good idea to get a view in there. And as you orbit around, you'll find that it's just not enough to go inside an interior space. So how do we do that? Well, you make a camera. So in level 1, I'll go up to this house icon and open the arrow next to it and create a camera. And I'll place the camera, let's say right here. And then I'll place the target to the camera over here. And now I'm looking into that space. And that doesn't look like much yet because it's just a box. But this will be a vantage point that we can view the stair as we're building it. We'll go back to level 1. And we're going to build our stair over here. Okay, so when we're building a stair, we have different choices of the type of stair that we want to make over here. And I'm going to choose the straight stair. And strangely, you'd think that if you wanted a U-shaped stair, that you'd have to choose this one over here. This one's different. This is a winder stair where the stairs actually, the treads actually angle around the corner. And this is something that's more common in Europe than it is in North America. So I'm going to create a more rectilinear type of stair using the straight tool. And you can actually make any shaped stair with the straight tool. And we're going to run from level 1 to level 2 with no offsets. And Revit is going to calculate how many risers we need based on the rules that are built into this type. And we can choose the type here. So we have different loaded types. I'm going to use this one here, the 7-inch max riser, 11-inch tread, which is a kind of common rule of thumb, 7 to 11, which creates a comfortable stair that works with building codes mostly. So I'm going to use that. And this is best for a residential type of stair. These other ones are more for commercial projects, I think, where we have concrete stairs and we have a metal stair. So this is the type I'll use from level 1 to level 2. And because we have a 10-foot level 2, it's going to calculate the number of stairs that we need and the riser height for each step down to this very small fraction of an inch. So thankfully, Revit does all the math for us. And what we need to do is click where we want the stair to begin and then where we want it to end. Now, if we wanted to have a complete straight run, we would go all the way to the end. But in this case, I'm going to have it go halfway. So we have a total of 18 risers that we need. I'm going to use 9 risers. And then I'm going to click somewhere below this, directly below it. And depending on where I angle this, you can see that the landing being generated would have whatever angle I specify. But in this case, I want to run it right back horizontally. And I'll click over here to create the additional 9 risers that we need to get up to the second level. And now I've essentially created a U-shaped stair. I'll click OK up here. And it says the rail is not continuous. Well, that's okay. Well, we're going to deal with the railings a little bit later. I'm just going to dismiss that for now. And this stair is just kind of hovering in the middle of the room. So what I'm going to do is select it and just drag it over a little closer to the wall, corner over here somewhere. And let's take a look in the 3D view 1, and you can see what we're getting here. A fairly complicated object with railings on it. Now, the railings that I want are going to be different. And in fact, I want the stair maybe to run the other way so that the first flight of stairs is over here. How do we do that? I'll go back to level 1 and click this little arrow here. This will flip the stairs up direction. We get the same warning. In 3D view 1, it looks like this now. So we flipped the stair around and made the mirror image of it. Okay, we're getting a warning because the way that this has to kind of turn and everything maybe is not possible. And that has to do with how much space we have in here. Now, what I'd like to do is build an interior wall running down the middle. This is typical in a residential kind of application. So before I finish my stair, I'm going to draw a wall in. This wall is going to be a basic interior partition. Maybe it's 4 3/4 inch partition, 1 hour rated. And it's going to go from level 1 up to level 2. And I'm just going to draw it like this. And we're going to end up putting that inside of here in a second. But before we know where to put it, we need to get the stair in the right position. So I'm going to select the stair, and it's a little tricky because we have railings. So I'm going to click on the stair itself like this. And I'll use the align tool and then click on the wall and then click on the stair and then do the same thing over here, wall and then stair. Okay, let's take a look at that in 3D. Now, it's hard to tell what's going on. It looks like the stair is embedded in the wall maybe a little bit. So we have to make some refinements here, and I think it would be easier if we didn't have this giant railing in the way. So I'm going to select both railings and change the type to something simpler. Let's say it's a pipe wall mount. This is going to be something more like what we want for a residential application, this type of thing. We're going to be revising that later, but it's a little less busy on the screen now. You can click on the stair and go back to level 1. And I need to move it over a little bit. It's hard to say. I'm going to use the arrow keys just to nudge it. And I think I might have better luck if I were to do this in 3D. So I'm going to go back to my camera view. And I'm going to use the steering wheel to navigate in here. But before I do, I have this crop region visible, and I don't want to see that. So I'll deselect, and I'm going to turn off crop view right here. Then I can have that kind of fill my screen. Then I'm going to use the steering wheel. And this is how we navigate around an interior. So I can walk by dragging on this, and I can walk around, go left and right, and real subtle motions are what you want to do here. And it's all relative to this dot. So the further away from that I move the mouse, the faster I walk. So I can walk over here and then turn right and position myself so I can see what's happening here a little bit better. And then close that. All right. You can use a line, click on the wall, and then I want to get the back side of the stair. So I'm going to press the tab key until I get that, and I can click on that, and that should line it up. And I think it did, but let's look at it in level 1. Yeah, it seems like it did. This dashed line is right on the wall. So evidently that dashed line is the border of the stair. I'll go to Align, click on the wall, click on the stair, take a look in 3D View 1 again, and I'd like to get a better look over there. So what I'm going to do is use the steering wheel again and walk over here, and you can walk right through the wall. And you can also pan. You can see that that's lined up. I can walk backwards, and I can look. So we're going to fix everything here in a minute. But I just want to get a good view of this and make sure I'm getting what I'm imagining. All right. Go back to level 1, and I'm going to take this wall right here and just kind of roughly position it. And then I'll use a line to line it up like that with the edge of the stair. Let's take a look in 3D and see if that makes any sense. I'll use the steering wheel, walk. Looks good. Lined up. We need to get rid of this gap in here now. So we select the stair, edit the stairs, select this flight, and use the arrow keys to nudge it up. Or use a line, click on the wall, and then click on the stair to line it up exactly. And then go back to the cyan tab and accept the change. Take a look in 3D View 1 and use the steering wheel to get a better look at it. I think it's good. One thing I noticed though is that the railings are all wrong. They're floating. They're not even attached to the wall. So if I click on the railing, I think it says here, offset from path. If that was 0, that moves it in a bit, but it's not quite right, even so. You can see that it's still sticking out beyond. So I'll use a negative value here, negative 0 feet and 2 inches. No, it says the rail is not continuous. Well, that's okay. The reason is that it has to turn a corner too quickly. And so it's breaking the rail up there. But I think that these fasteners are now on the wall. Yeah, they are. So evidently the railing has to be with an offset of negative 2 inches to work. All right. So let's back up a little bit and get a better view. So to fix that railing, I'm going to look in level 1. And the railing selected, I can edit the path. And so this is the path. I don't want to have a railing going around the corner, so I'm going to select that vertical line and get rid of it. Okay. And it's going to tell me that it can't do it because it has to be a continuous single sketch. Quit sketching. Yes, discard. So what I really need is two railings, two separate railings that each go up their corresponding flights. So what I'm going to do is take this railing and copy it to the clipboard. And it's on the clipboard. And I can then edit this railing and get rid of these two segments. So we just have a railing going up that far. And then I'm going to paste aligned to the current view or aligned to the same place, either way. And now we have the warnings. I then need to edit this one and get rid of these two segments. So now we have two separate railings. Let's take a look at that in 3D View 1. I see this one all right. I can't see the other one. But when I select this wall, I can see through it, just enough so I can actually verify that there is indeed a railing up there. And we'll get a better view of that on level 2. One thing I'm noticing, though, is that the railing is stopping right at the top of the stairs, and this fastener is right on the corner, and that's not good. So I can select this, edit the path, click on the path, and just pull it back a short distance, like so. And then you can see that that makes more sense. Another thing we can do is we can get into the railing itself, edit its type, and then edit the handrail. So the railings are complicated objects. They can have all kinds of different elements in them. And what we're interested in is the handrail within the railing. And that's controlled by this separate style. I can go in here and edit that, and it opens up a deeper level here within this. This is just the handrail. And then I can say, okay, well, the handrail, I want it to have an extension at the bottom or at the top. Let's say that it's going to be 3 inches longer at the bottom and at the top. And that's giving us these little extensions that go beyond, you see? And if we wanted this to go even further down here, let's say, we could edit that and edit this again. And on the bottom, we can say we want that one to be 6 inches long. And we're starting to get that. So there's really a huge complexity and depth to these objects that you can delve into on your own. Now here, I need to have a wall, obviously, to hold up this railing, right? So let's build that. I'll go to level 1, and we'll take this wall here, whatever it is, whatever type it is. I forget what it is, but what we can do is just select it and click here to create a similar object. This is something I use all the time. Create similar. And that will make another wall of the same type. And I can draw that in down here. Now, I want this to line up with the stair, so I'll use a line. And then click on the edge of the stair and then the edge of the wall. Let's take a look at that in 3D. It goes all the way up. That's higher than I want it to go. So in this case, what I'm going to do is edit the profile of this wall. And then I can pull off lines, pick lines off of this geometry. I can pick this line, I can pick this line. Those are right on the edge of the railing. And maybe I want to offset that now to have it be a little higher. Let's say it's like maybe 3 inches. I'll offset that above. And then I can modify this and get rid of these lines and trim this together. And whenever you have a sketch mode like this, you have to create a closed boundary. And you can't have extraneous elements like this line. And then when I accept, you'll see that what we have now is a special wall that's cut back. And this is nice because it allows us to see more into the room. I don't really like how this is kind of sticking out here, though. And I notice that it needs to be offset. So let's go like this and offset this -2 inches, -0 space 2 inches. That's how you get 2 inches. Apply. That's better. It's attached. But down here, I don't like that. So maybe what I'm going to do is revise my profile and just select this and press the up arrow to nudge it up. Okay, that's looking great. All right, now over here, I want another wall to create this kind of space underneath the stair. Maybe we can use that for a space for the water heater. So I can go here and create a similar wall. And Revit cleans up the walls. You see how I don't have to really worry about exactly where that wall terminates? I just have to bring it into the volume of this wall and Revit will clean it up. And also down here, you see how this is kind of sticking beyond? I'll just use trim and trim these two walls together. And we have a nice corner there. And then I can use a line and line this up. And it's looking good. So we need a door on that, right? Let's look at it in 3D. Another thing is this wall here should actually end when it meets the floor above. So I'm going to attach that to this floor. And then Revit draws in a line there. This one here, this wall here, do I want that to go up higher? Yes, I think I do. I want this to go up higher. And we'll deal with that when we get up to the next floor. Yeah, but I'm going to join this together with the floor, and then we'll get a line of intersection there. Well, we're not at the moment, but we will later. Actually, you know what we need to do is cut the floor back. That's the problem. Right now, the floor is covering up the stair, and that's something we should attend to. I'll go to level 2, and we have a problem because the floor extends completely covering the space. What I need to do is select that floor, and it can be tricky to do it. Here's a way you can do it. Make a crossing window that selects all that stuff, and then go to filter and filter out the walls and just select the floor. This is a quick way of getting down and drilling down to what you want to select. Then I'm going to edit the boundary of the floor, and I'm going to pick lines off of the stair right here, and maybe another one right here, and then I will use trim. By the way, this symbol represents the span direction, structural span direction, which would be the shortest side. It wouldn't span this way because this is the long direction. It would span this way. Your joists would run this way. So that's where that symbol is. And you can change that by clicking span direction and clicking on an edge, and the symbol moves. So in this case, span direction being here makes sense. Okay. Again, whenever you change the floor or the walls, when they're like this, you get this question. Would you like walls that go up to this floor's level to attach to its bottom? I want to say attach, and then that's going to cause a problem. So cancel. So instead, they remain unattached. Let's see if that made any changes here. I think we're okay. We have kind of a situation up here that needs to be resolved. I think the solution is actually pulling this back a little more. Yeah. I'm going to align from here to the sketch. And what does that do for us? That makes it cleaner. Take a look at that above, though. Does that work up here? We have our stair. We have a wall here. We shouldn't have wall at the top of the stair. So this one should really attach to the floor. Doesn't work. We need to edit the floor, I think. We need to edit the boundary of the floor to probably go to the edge of the stair. And then I'm going to pull a line off of this wall and trim things like so. And then the stair makes more sense with the floor because the floor is right next to it. But the wall below, it sort of makes sense now. It stops at the ceiling there. This wall here, it's a fairly complicated, geometric problem that we have here in designing this. But showing you different ways of visualizing that. Now, let's see what we have here. I don't think we would need a handrail that runs along the wall, obviously. So what we're going to do here is copy this to the clipboard. Then I'm going to edit this handrail. and get rid of these segments here, right? And then I'm going to paste that in the same place and then edit the new copy, the pasted copy, and get rid of these portions of it. So now we have separate handrails. And on this one, it goes too far. I need to pull this back. And on this one, it goes too far, like so. So that makes more sense. But this has to go up higher. And again, here, we didn't need this for a structural reason, which we may need, but if we didn't need it, we could cut it back. I think it would make more sense to have this go up and go all the way to the roof. So I can attach that to the roof. And then we can, run studs all the way up, and that will allow us to attach the stair to it, and it'll be stronger. Okay, so I'm happy with it. I think it's finally working. Obviously, we need to deal with this up here. We need to make it so you can't fall below, and so we can put in walls or railings as we need as the design progresses. But for now, I'm happy with it. We do need a door in here, though. So on level 1, I can add a door down there. We'll go to architecture, door, and I don't want the same door with the window in it, of course. I want to use a door that it has a full panel. And I think these doors here are more for commercial projects. So I'm tempted to load a new family of doors from the residential folder. And I notice that the front door has these 2 panels side by side. So is there a door like that on the interior? Yeah, this one here, or this one here. I'll go with the simpler 4-panel. Okay. And then I want this to be a narrower door, not 36, maybe 30 by, let's see if we have 30 by 84. Yeah. So then I can add this door here. And if I press the space bar, it's going to flip the swing. I'm looking at the temporary dimensions over there on the right. It says 8 inches above and below. When I click here, it adds the door in. I look in 3D View 1, you can see the door. So that's a great closet underneath the stair that we can use for maybe the water heater. So I can place that in here by going to Component, Load Family, and where would a water heater be? Let's see. It would be piece of specialty equipment or a plumbing. See if it's under specialty equipment. And we want domestic. And we're talking about a water heater. I don't see it here. It must be under plumbing. Architectural equipment. Water heaters. There it is. Water heater. Okay. And place that right in here. Great. So we have a place for that, and it's hidden inside there. Wonderful. Now, moving on, let's think about the layout on floor 1. So at this point, we have a way in, we have an entry, and we have a stair, and our mechanical room. So how are we going to lay this out? I know we're going to need a washroom on the first floor, and I'm going to put the bedrooms upstairs. So we're going to have a kitchen, a living room, dining room, and a washroom down here. So I'm kind of thinking that the washroom should be here. And it's just going to be a powder room with a toilet and a sink. So I could grab a toilet from fixtures under plumbing, and we're talking about water closets. I'll use a domestic toilet, either 2D or 3D. I don't really think we're going to need to see that in 3D, so a 2D one is fine. And I'm going to place that in here. I guess it has to be hosted to a wall. So I'm just going to place that here for now, and that's not where it's going to end up. So I'm going to take this wall and create a similar wall here and here. And we can always adjust things. That's the great thing about Revit, is you're never fixed. Everything is in flux. So I can select this toilet create a similar toilet and attach that to this wall. Then I can get rid of this one, right? And I think we need at least, let's say, a 3-foot wide space in here. So if I click on this, this is the temporary dimension, and I can click on this little grip here to flip that. Sometimes it'll flip to the other side of the wall, but you can also drag it and put it where you want it. And then I can specify that I want this to be, let's say, 3'6", and that will exactly move that wall over to be that distance. And then this toilet, I want it to be centered in that space, right? So how can I do that? I can type LI for line, draw in a line from the midpoint, like so. Then I can use the align tool, which is AL. You can just type that in, AL. Click on the line and then click on the toilet and have them align. Then I can erase this temporary line. And because the toilet is hosted to the wall, when I move the wall by holding Shift up arrow, the toilet goes with it. Now we need a sink. So I go to Architecture, Component, Load Family, and let's see if we can find a sink that would be suitable. You know, I'm not seeing anything that I really like. Maybe the vanity here would work. Vanity square. Let's see if that works in our application here. Yeah, could work. What about a counter though? Let's load a new component in. Load. And let's see if we can find a counter. We're going to go up. And a counter would be, I think, under casework, countertops. And we have a variety of countertops. Some of them include holes for sinks. So here's one, vanity countertop with square sinkhole. Okay. Place that right there. And then the countertop has these grips, which allow me to move it. And the hole also has grips, which allow me to position that relative to the sink. So we have it there. Now, it's not necessarily centered, I don't think, unless I just got lucky. Maybe I did. I'm going to draw a line right up the middle. And it looks like I just got lucky or eyeballed it correctly where it's right in the middle. Great. That's fine. Now, we need room for a door to come in here. So the door I'm going to use is the same as that one. So I can click on that one and then click Create Similar and have the door exist right about here. And great, we have a powder room. Very minimalistic place, but we need it. Now, I don't want to have this right next to my kitchen, you know? So what I'm going to do is take this wall and extend it out some distance. I don't know how far. Then my kitchen will be over here. So we'll have this kind of separation somewhat. Now, the kitchen, maybe I'll have an L-shaped counter here for a kitchen. So go to Component, Load Family. I'm still in the Countertops folder, which is convenient. Countertop L-shaped, that's what I want. Here's another one. Countertop L-shaped. Not sure the difference. Maybe I'll just use this one. Place that here. And then I can use these grips to, size this to whatever size I need. All right, how about a refrigerator? I'm going to find that. It's probably under specialty equipment, I would think. And in here, we're going to find domestic. And what's high end? High end. Refrigerator. Here's a wide one. Stainless steel door. Let's go with that one. Looks like a Sub-Zero maybe. I can place that right in here. It says freezer on it, but it could be a refrigerator. Now, if I don't want the word freezer on there, I can edit the family, look in the top view, and take this word out. Load into project and close, don't save. Overwrite. Okay, so this is my refrigerator or freezer, as the case may be, and I'm going to align that with the wall. And then I just need to kind of figure out how big my kitchen is, and that's going to be sort of controlled somewhat by the rest of the uses that I have for this space. So over here, we're going to have, this is going to be like a mudroom where you enter initially. And maybe for that, we need a wall. So I'm going to select this wall, make a similar wall over here, like that. And what is this going up to? It's going up to level 2. That's fine. Maybe we need some furnishings in here. Well, we can add furnishings later, but this is going to be a bench and a coat rack. We're going to come in here. We're going to come around here. And maybe we need a wall running this way that will separate the kitchen from the living space. And we need to figure out like how much space we really need. And the dining room will go here. This will be a fireplace. We need some windows, obviously, in different places on the wall. So there's a lot more to do. Let's tackle that by looking at a website that I like to use here. There's a couple of them. I'm going to recommend this one here. It's called architree.com, and they have a lot of things for sale. But they also have a free page, and here you can download various models which are well built. Here's a coat rack with some items, and sign up for a free account, and you can download these Revit families. And I've already done some of these things. There's another website that's very useful here called bimobject.com. And let me just show you that here. So bimobject.com, you create a free account. It has me logged in. I can search for things. Let's say I want a bench. Search for that. And then I can find all kinds of interesting models here. And many of them have Revit family files. So I could go into download here, and you may find different software in here. So I can deselect all, and I can just get the Revit family, and I can download that. And once you have that Revit family on your hard drive, you can then just drag and drop it into Revit. So for example, let me navigate over here to my project folder, show you this here. So we have a bunch of different families that I've downloaded, including the goat hook. We have different things that I've found that I needed in developing this project. So if I want one of them, let's say the coat hook, I can just drag and drop this right into Revit. It's going to upgrade that model to the current version and allow me to place it. And this coat rack, I can press the space bar to rotate it, and then I can just place it here. And let's see what that looks like. I'll go to 3D View 1, and I need to navigate over there, so I'll use the steering wheel, and I'll walk over here, turn the corner, and back up. I'm not seeing it. I'll look down, and there it is. It's on the ground. That's the problem. So I need to modify, select this one, elevation from level 1. It's going to be, I don't know, let's say it's 3'6" above that. Maybe it's even higher. It's 4 feet high. There we go. And so it's always a good idea to take a look at what you're building in 3D as you're doing it. So there's my coat rack. I think it should be even higher, 5 feet. And then we can have a bench down there. See, do I have a bench? I can go to view these like this. I'm not seeing a bench. I need to load one in. So let's say we want this bench here that I was just looking at. I can download that. And once it's downloaded, I can drag the family right into my project. And I can place it here. This one's a bit long. I don't know if this is an outdoor bench, but it could work, maybe. We might also be able to edit the length here if we edit the type. It depends on how they've designed the family entirely. So I'm not seeing that here. This is a real product that probably only comes in one size. But for my purpose here, I'm just going to kind of represent the bench, not necessarily a real product. So I could go into the family and I can see it here. I could take all this and I could move it over. This isn't going to work because it looks like we have more complexity than I want. So I'm going to cancel that. So it's not really the right bench for me. So I can get rid of that. Now, once I've loaded it into my project, though, be aware that it exists now under families in the project browser. So whatever that was called, and I don't remember what it was called. Let's see, it was called landscaping something or other. So I can probably find that in here under, it's not under landscaping. It could be under furniture. There it is. This model is part of my project now that I brought it in, even though I've deleted it, still here. So if I really want to get rid of it, I have to right click on that and say delete. And now it's actually gone. Okay. So now maybe I want to find a different bench that makes more sense for my project. So let's see if we can do better. I'll go back and let's just see if we can find a bench that would make more sense for this room. Not sure, maybe this one. Let's see. Yeah, and I definitely need something narrower. So I'm going to go with maybe this one. Yeah, I'll try this one here. Download. And what you're going to get is really going to vary. It's going to depend. This one doesn't even have a Revit file, so that's not going to work for us. Sometimes this is the case. It's just PDF, Word files and stuff. It's not going to work for us. So we need to find a bench that actually has a Revit model. How about this one? Kind of a nice design. I like it. Deselect all. I just want the Revit family. The type catalog would give you different sizes that you can order this product in, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to download the Revit family. And once that's downloaded, I can just drag and drop it into my project. And that's better. Let's take a look at that. That looks fine. So that's the kind of thing that you'll be doing here when you're laying out your design, is experimenting with real furnishings and seeing what works in the space. So I've already downloaded some of these other things that I know do work. Here's a sofa. I'm going to bring that in. And I'll press the space bar to rotate that in 90-degree increments. By the way, when you bring in models that have textures assigned to them, you need to specify where that folder is. And you can do that by going to File, Options, Rendering, and then you add your folder right here. So you need to specify your maps folder wherever you're putting your texture maps. And you typically do that prior to pulling in the furnishing. So if I pull that in now, maybe it'll find the textures. Let's see. Now, I won't know if it has the right textures on it until I look at it. And I need to look at it in a mode that shows textures. Yeah. So this piece of furniture has texture maps on the furniture itself and on this blanket. And those are in my maps folder here. So these textures came with the download, and I put them in this folder already so that they can be referenced. Without that, your models will, not be very realistic. I'll go back to level 1, and what else can we bring in? Let's see. We need maybe this nice lounge chair. This will be useful in our level 1. I'll drag and drop that over here. And here's an example of a model that needs some work. So they just to depict it as a box. I'll edit the family and go into the reference level. You can see that there's a box, all right. And this may be a file format issue. Maybe this is a bounding box. Anyway, I need to get rid of that. I'll look at that in 3D. We have this kind of low poly representation that I don't really want. And then I can go ahead and load that into the project and close. And in this case, I will save the family because I don't want to have those anymore. And it already exists. Do I want to replace it? Yes, I do. Overwrite what I have. And where'd it go? Component? It's not showing at all. So maybe there's some problem with that. Let's edit that. To get at that, I need to maybe view this in wireframe, in fine detail. In fine detail, it shows up. So that's the problem. I need to go and edit that family. And I need to select the whole thing and go into visibility graphics right here by clicking edit. And I can show where I want that to appear. I actually want to see it in every level of detail here, like so. Load into project, save, overwrite, overwrite. And now even if I'm in coarse detail, I should be able to see it, right? I'll go into medium detail. Medium detail, we see different things. We see like the swing of the refrigerator. In coarse detail, we do not. So each family can display things in the different levels of detail. You just need to be aware of that. So I'm going to have this, maybe I'll have a seating group over here. I'll have this chair. I'll have another one over here and a little table in between. So maybe we'll put the table in between in next. Let me locate that. Here's a table. I can put that in. And it's common for furnishings to come in an old version of Revit. And the idea is it's more compatible with more people if they supply that in an earlier version of Revit. And I can select this and then use this tool here, mirror pick axis. And then I can click right on the midpoint of that coffee table and we'll get a mirror image of the chair over here. So this is my kind of lounge area. And over here, we're going to have, what should we have right here? Maybe a library. Maybe we need another one of these chairs when you're reading a book. I'll rotate it. And if we're reading a book, well, it'd be nice to have a bookshelf, wouldn't it? So I can add a component, load family, and let's see if I can find a bookshelf here. That would be under furniture, storage, shelving. And rotate that. I'm not really sure if it's facing the right way. And let's investigate this bookshelf. If I edit the type, can I change it to be wider? Yes. I have control right here over exactly the dimensions of this. Okay. I would like to look at that in 3D and see if the bookshelf is facing the right way. And it looks like it doesn't have a back, so it's probably symmetric on either side. That's fine. I'll align that now with the wall. And so now we have this nice area here for reading. And then we have another area down here for watching TV. I'll mount a TV on this wall. I think I have an actual TV set here. I can place that in. And I can rotate that by pressing the space bar. This particular family looks like it has a stand which I can toggle on and off. That's convenient. I can line that up with the wall and mount it on the wall. And now we can kind of figure out how much space we need for these different rooms. So I think it's a little tight over here. I'd like to have an island. Put in the island and then we can make some decisions. So the island, it's going to go right in here. Wouldn't it be interesting to have a golden rectangle island, you know, that would match the footprint of the building? Let's do that. So I'm going to draw model lines here. I'm going to offset that 3'6" from this line here. So first of all, before I offset, I need to just draw in the line. And instead of using the offset tool, I'm going to do it here, 3'6". And that allows me to actually draw that offset from the line I'm tracing over. I can do that again here. By pressing the space bar, I can get it to offset on one side or the other. And I'm doing that so that I have a corridor around the island with ample space. So it's 3'6". I can then trim these two together. And how wide should this be? An island? I don't know. Maybe about, let's measure it. Let's measure it from here. I think maybe it's about 4 feet or 3'6". Let's go with 3'6". So if I was going to offset this 3'6", and then I can trim it together. So if that's 3'6", what would this be if it was in the golden ratio? Well, let's figure that out. So 3'6", so 3 times 12 is 3 feet plus 6 inches. It's 42 inches. So 42 inches wide times 1.618, that's 68 inches. So I can offset this 68 inches. And then I can trim this together. So that is the outline of my island and how I want it positioned relative to the counter to give me a clearance of 3'6" on both sides. Okay, so that kind of tells me something about kitchen design. I can now maybe memorialize this with a counter instead of just a series of lines on the ground. So I'll go to architecture, component, load, family. I want casework, countertops. I want a countertop island, and it's just going to go here. And then I want to move that right up here, and then position it just so. I would like to get rid of the model lines. So I'll make a crossing selection around those elements, go to filter, and I only want to select the lines and delete them. Wonderful. So now I have a countertop here floating above the ground. And of course, in a real kitchen, we would have to design all of the cabinets under counter and above to design a complete kitchen. But that process could take a couple of days to really work that out. But I find that when you're in the initial stages, it's helpful just to lay out the countertops, and that will give you a good direction for when you actually design the real kitchen. Now I'm going to align this island with the edge of the counter, and I'm going to align this island with the refrigerator, and the refrigerator with the counter. So now we have kind of dialed in our basic kitchen design. The sink will be over here maybe, and we'll need a window to look out when we're doing the dishes. So let's add a window, and this can always be changed. So I'm just going to pop in a casement window over here for now. And of course, at any time we can change that. But this is a good start. Maybe the sink will be here. The stove will be either on the island itself or maybe over here. Actually, the dishwasher will have to be next to the sink. And we'll just need to work that out in the future. But this is a good rough in. Now here, I'm going to have this wall turn the corner like so. And then I'm going to use a line to line things up and trim to trim this together. So now we don't just see the side of the refrigerator when we come in. Also, I'm going to align this together. And I always like to leave a little breathing room around the appliance just by using the nudge feature with the arrows, just so that we don't have a situation where the refrigerator doesn't actually fit. We need space here to get in here, right? We need ample space. Let's say that's going to be, well, let's think about this. This island is no longer lined up with this stuff, so I would like to fix that. I'm going to draw in a line here temporarily, and I'll take this stuff and move it over. Didn't quite work the way I was intending. And move this over like so. There we go. Okay, that's better. So now we have more space basically to get through here. And if let's say there are bar stools here, we need at least, let's say 5 feet so that we can walk behind the people on the bar stools without a problem. So I can draw in a model line here that goes over 5 feet. If I want to specify that exactly, I can just type 5, enter, and I'll draw a line going down this way. Then I can use the line tool AL, click on this, and then click on the wall. That gives me 5-foot clearance in this kind of hallway now. Looks like the television got disconnected, so I need to align that. And I'll click the padlock to create a constraint that will always keep those elements together. So I can't move this off the wall. If I try to move it, I can only move it up and down. I can't drag it side to side because of that constraint. Okay, now let's think about how we're going to terminate all this stuff. Let's see, can we deal with moving this wall up a little? No, I think it's fine where it is. Maybe I'll use a line and line this wall with this one. I think that makes sense. And down here, we're going to have a dining area. Maybe we don't really need this to be quite so long. Should we terminate it right here at the same level as the kitchen? That's a possibility. I think we ought to do that. So align those things together. Okay. Kind of designs itself once you start going and you start lining things up. It starts to make your decisions a little bit easier as you're going along. So I'm going to move this from the midpoint of the television to the midpoint of the wall. And then I will align from the midpoint of the television, I'm going to align the sofa to that. Okay? And then the sofa probably needs these end tables on either side. Be nice. And I can mirror that around the center of the sofa. So we have a nice situation where we can put our drinks down, watch that, and it's starting to come together. We need a dining table over here. So let's see if I have one. I don't think I do, so I'm going to have to download that. And I'm going to leave that up to you. I think just in the interest of time, I don't want to get lost in the weeds of inserting all the different furniture components. Maybe I'll add another one here. I notice I have it. I'll add this nice lounge chair, and I will rotate that. And maybe also duplicate it. Let's take a look at what we have now in 3D. I can go into the 3D mode and look at the building from outside, and I can start to see what's going on in there. The kitchen just has the countertops, and as I said, there's a lot more work that has to go on in there to really design a real kitchen. I also notice that we have a potential conflict with the window. So the window needs to move up a little bit. The sill height just needs to go up, and then there's no more conflict. Okay, so the television is also way too low. The elevation should be maybe 3 feet high. It's too high, 2'6". We have a pretty low sofa here. We don't want to have to look up. Great. All right, so we have things coming together here in terms of the utilization of the space. Let's fix things. I noticed this wall should terminate at the floor, and looks like all of these walls have that problem. This one back here, attach top base, and then click on the floor. These walls as well, attach top base, click on the floor. This one too, and we have a clear floor up there. Okay, great. Let's go to level 2 and see what we can do up there. So on level 2, we're seeing through to the floor below. Now, why is that? Let's see. On level 2, I'm going to deselect by clicking off to the side. And then the underlay feature. This is useful when you want to see down below your level. But in this case, I don't want that to be on. I don't want to see level 1 below level 2. I want to turn this off. So I'll click here and say none. So the base level is none. And that gets rid of those things that are below that would be obscured by the floor itself. All right. So upstairs, what are we going to do? We're going to have bedrooms up here and a bathroom, right? So let's figure that out. I think we have a wall that we're going to need off here to close this opening off so that we don't fall down below. So I'm going to take this wall and create a similar wall right here. And then I will align this to the edge like so. And here's the floor where it's cut back to. And what I need here is a new wall. And I'm going to draw that not on the center line, but to either the interior or the exterior. And I'll draw that down like this, and I'll press the spacebar to flip it over to the other side, and then trim those together. And I'd like to take a look at that now in 3D to see what I'm getting. So where am I here? I'm looking at the first floor, and I need to go upstairs. So I'll use the steering wheel and pan. I'll look like more horizontally first. Then I'll pan up until I'm upstairs. Walk over here. Let's take a look at what we have in the corner. And look. So we have this big space way up high. It's too high. So first thing I want to do maybe is put in a ceiling. We need a ceiling. So where is that going to go? We go to architecture, ceiling, and I'm going to sketch the ceiling. And I'm going to pull that I'm going to choose the kind of ceiling that I want. It's going to be a gypsum wallboard ceiling on metal stud type of ceiling. And it's going to be created by drawing a rectangle in this space. And let's just see what that gives us in 3D. So there it is, going beyond the roof. And the height of the ceiling is controlled by selecting it and editing the type. And you can see structure is fine. The height is specified right here, 9 feet. 9 feet is a high ceiling, and I'm happy with that. So I'm going to stick with that. But how am I going to figure out how to terminate this ceiling right up there? Well, let's see if I can edit the boundary of that ceiling. And if I can pick lines off of here, I don't think I can because we have this dynamic situation. So we need to create lines in here. And one way to do that is by drawing in a model line. And I'd like that to be right up there. But to get that up there, I need to specify the plane that I want the line to exist in. So I'm going to set the work plane over here. And what I'm going to do is pick a plane. And I'm going to pick this plane, which is right on the bottom of the ceiling. And then I should be able to draw a line on that plane. And I want that line to be right over here. So that's giving me some needed information that I have here. And I'm going to draw another line here on that same plane. I can just find it. There it is. No, it's not quite doing it for me. Can I join this together with the ceiling? Yes, that's working better. So that's giving me an intersection line that I can actually use. So I can draw this line along the edge. Okay, now that I've done that, I can take the ceiling and edit the boundary. And I believe we might be able to snap to these things now by using the align tool. Align this line to the sketch and this line to the sketch, and then accept that. So that is doing what we need it to do. It has cut the ceiling back to where it intersects with the roof. Fairly tricky, I have to say. Now, I don't want those model lines in there anymore, and probably have several of them. So I'm going to make a selection around that, go to the filter, and select only the model lines, delete them. Now, I can go back into my 3D view, and I can look up. Now I have a flat ceiling. This is going to make it easier to deal with. So I can select these walls and attach them to the ceiling. And I can also select this wall and edit the profile and pick the slope of the roof and then trim that together so the wall cuts back appropriately. I can see through this wall and I can see that there's a wall in there, the one that the stair is on, and it doesn't terminate properly. So I need to be able to see that from another angle. I need to be able to walk over here and pan over here and back up. By the way, when you're in an interior on the steering wheel, there's an advanced option here that you can choose called increase, decrease focal length. And this is quite helpful in an enclosed space like this. I'll choose this item and then drag the mouse down, and this will widen my view. Press escape, and now I can actually see more in this space than I could previously. Now, observe that this ceiling is cutting off the curtain wall. So we're going to have to think about that and how we're going to respond to that on the curtain wall. This is highlighting the fact that whenever you make a change, it usually has far-reaching repercussions. And you need to spot those things primarily in 3D, which is what I'm trying to show you, how useful it is to be able to move around in 3D and join things together. Here, I'll go to trim extend and trim these two walls together. That didn't work. Undo. We have a line here on this wall that I don't really want. So I can eliminate that by using line mode and making these invisible lines. And that works very well. All right, so that's looking perfect. Let's go to level 2 and let's look at 3D and see what we can do about the curtain wall. So first thing is the ceiling doesn't come all the way forward. Let me see if I can select that here in 3D, edit the boundary, go in level 2, pull this up, and that ceiling has got to go around the chimney, doesn't it? So I'm going to pick lines on the chimney, cut this line back, and trim this together. That conforms to the geometry better. So now we have the ceiling showing where it needs to show. So I think what we need to do is add a grid line to our curtain wall right at the bottom of the ceiling. I'm going to select my curtain wall, go to curtain grid, and be helpful if I could see this edge over here. So what I want to do is get this right at that ceiling level. It snaps to it, and I can move that if I want to just by nudging it, getting it to line up where I want it. And it should really be 9 feet exactly above the one below. So I can specify that, right? And then what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to take this little piece and delete it, and I'm going to get rid of that little thing by selecting the curtain grid and going to add remove segments and clicking on it. And then I'm going to fill this in with mullions. And this time, instead of using all, I'm going to say grid line, click on this grid line and add a mullion, like so. And in reality, this one wouldn't go all the way up, it would be back like that. And then I'll tab select the panel. I'm going to change that to solid. And so just like that, I've fairly easily fixed my curtain grid so it makes sense with this ceiling situation. We'll do the same thing over here. Select the curtain wall, go to curtain grid, add a curtain grid right about here, select this, change it to exactly 9 feet. Over here, I'm going to get rid of that and remove this little segment, which I don't need, and then add a mullion, just one, on the grid line. And then this vertical mullion should be pulled back. So we have a continuous horizontal one there. And then I will tab select the panel and change its type to solid. All right. So now that makes much more sense on the exterior. We have this highlight color, which is kind of interesting. We could have that be whatever color we wanted. I just chose green for now. And let's go back to level 2. So in here, we've dealt with the ceiling conditions. So now we can start to think about how we want to lay out the space. And I think we already have this line here, so I'm going to pull that out more. And let's say that we want to have a washroom up here and maybe a closet and the master bedroom down here. And, the space is almost designing itself as I go because the space has these constraints on it and only certain things really make sense. And we want to have our master bedroom get the view. And so I suggest that we put the bed over here. We have a seating area over here. We have a closet area here. We have a bathroom here. And then this maybe would be an office. So instead of doing all of that for you, I think I'm going to just suggest it to you and leave it up to you to fill in these spaces as you see fit. But I'd like to kind of move on to another aspect of the project, which is the garage. And I'd like to build that off of the end of the building here. So to make some room for that, I'm going to pull this up. Instead of moving it like that, I'm going to just shift up arrow it, move that well out of the way. And let's see what we have in terms of our prop region here. We have plenty of space still. I'll pull this in. And by the way, we have this handy working section that we haven't really used yet. I'd like to show you that. So let me just pull this crop boundary in a little tighter. Okay, great. Now, we have a working section here that I can right click on and say, go to view. And then I can see that section directly. So if I go back to level 2, I can move this section forward and have it cut through different parts of the building, you see? And so the working sections are meant to be used while you're designing. You're just using this as an aid to help you figure out, what you're doing. And that's why it's shown in this red color. And it's a working section here. If you wanted to make this a real section that's going to be displayed on your sheets, you would change its type to building section. And then it becomes like this. It becomes the solid white line. I'll leave it as a working section for now. All right. Now we can also have a section going the other way through the building, the opposite direction. So I can create a section using this tool right here. And I can choose working section as the type. And I'll have that cut through the building like so. I can then take that and flip it to look that way. I can then go to that view and see through the building in this way. And this has its own crop region. You can see the levels there. So this is helpful as well to see what's going on in the building from this vantage point. Let's design the building garage. And I have a plan for that. So on level 1, what I'd like to do is take a wall just like this one and create a similar wall over here somewhere. Now, I'm not exactly sure how big to make the garage. We'll probably bring in a car to help us with that. But for now, I'm just going to pull that wall like so. And the exterior side is the side where the arrows are. So that is correct. And I would like to line that up with the inner face of the wall to the outer face of the wall so that we have it staggered like this. So it just jogs over 1'6", like so. And then I'm going to take this wall and mirror it using pick axis, and I'll click the central axis to mirror it to the other side. So let's take a look at that now in the 3D view. Let's see what we have. A couple of walls sticking out. Okay. Now, I'd like a similar roof on those walls, and maybe I'll have that start at level 2. So these two walls, I want them to go up to, not the spring line, but level 2. They're a little bit lower. And then on level 2, I'd like to see those walls. Now they don't come up through level 2, so we're not seeing them here. In order to see them on level 2, I need to change the underlay to display the level below. Now I can see them. And I'm just doing this temporarily. Now I can create a roof right here. And I don't want the roof to define slopes, so I'm going to uncheck this on the options bar, and I'm going to change the roof type to the same roof that I have used in the past. And I'm going to sketch that in like this, and then modify and select these two edges and make those two edges define the slope. And the slope is going to be 12 and 12, or 45 degrees. And we're seeing the cut plane of this plan is 4 feet above level 2. And so we're seeing where the roof is cut back at that elevation in this view currently. So I'm going to look in 3D, and you can see the roof goes all the way up like that. That's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this effect where we are getting this staggered effect. And I think I'm going to raise it up just a bit. So I'm going to take this roof and I'm going to offset it from level 2. I'm going to raise it up, I don't know, maybe 2 feet. Let's see if that's enough. Yeah, I like it. All right, let's try that. And then I want these walls to go up and meet the roof. So I'll select them and attach them to the roof, like so. And then, as before, I don't want to see the gypsum board on the outside. So I will paint them stucco on these surfaces. Next, I would like this roof to project beyond the wall slightly. I think this will be an interesting detail. I'll edit the footprint of the roof and just pull this out 7 feet and see what happens. I like it, but I think it's too far. And maybe this roof is too high also. So we make some more adjustments. Edit the footprint, pull it back a little bit. And yeah, I like that, but this is too high. We'll move this down to 0 again. Yeah, that could work. Not sure yet though. All right, so we have some line work issues. I notice this line is, there should be really a line in there that we're not seeing. I may be able to join it with the wall, inside the building here. Let me see if I can get that. It's not happening. I think really the solution might be just to nudge this over. I'm going to, at this magnification level, I'm going to nudge it 1, 2 times, and I'll do the same thing 1, 2 times. See what that looks like. Okay. I don't want an overhang. I want a clean connection here. So edit the footprint and align this with the walls. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Better. Now I don't want to see these particular lines in the 3D view, so I'm going to make them invisible. It's not going the way I wanted it to. See if we can, sometimes you can join things and the lines disappear. There we go. That's better. Great. So we have these forms, which I'm fond of, and we have a nice looking garage. Okay. So how are we going to deal with this end of the garage? Well, I think what I'm going to do is put in a wall. It's not going to be a really thick wall. It's going to be a regular wall, but it will be an exterior wall. Well, at this point, I'm just going to put in a generic wall, and we can always detail it later. Let's say it's 8 inches thick. I'm going to go about here. I want to put a car in here to get a sense of the space. So I believe I've downloaded a Cybertruck from architree.com, where I showed you before. And okay, I'm going to place that right in here in the garage. And let's take a look at that in 3D. So I can see it in there. There's a Cybertruck. Great. Now I want this wall to go up to the roof. So I'll attach it to the roof. And let's look in level 1. I want to have enough room to walk around the vehicle. This looks like a good amount of space for the vehicle, but I think that we should have these walls project out a bit more just as a design element, like so. And I want to align the roof to that as well. So now, when I did that, it didn't, it pulled the whole roof forward. So instead of trying to align the roof, what we need to do is edit the footprint of the roof and then align the footprint sketch. That's how you do it. Okay. Now, I've done all this because I want to put that nice, what is it, Belgian European wood trim siding in here. So I'm going to select this surface of the wall and actually go to split face and draw in a line here. Okay. And then go to paint, and I know it starts with the word Belgian. So we have that material on that surface there. Great. And I can do the same thing on the other surfaces easily enough. And take split face and sketch this in. And for this to work properly, this line has to go all the way across, like so. or it won't split. This adds a very nice detail. So split this one, and then split again on the roof, and accept, and then paint like that. Great. So we could do that same treatment under here. I'll leave that up to you. Okay, how about we apply this material to this entire wall? That's cool. And then we can add another bedroom on the second floor. So if I look on the second floor now, we have a space and we can see the vehicle below. So what I need to do really is create a floor up here. What I need to do is hide the roof temporarily. So I'm going to hide that in view by element. And then I will create a floor using rectangle. I'm going to pick these walls as the boundaries of the floor. And then the span direction will go the other way. Okay. We like the walls that go up to this to attach to its bottom. I don't think we have any walls that go up to that. Don't attach. It overlaps. Do you want to join the geometry? Yes. Okay. And then on this view, I'm going to turn off the underlay. Now we're looking at the floor of this room. Now we need a way in, so we need a door. And I already have a door that I could use on level 1. I'll take this door, create a similar door, go to level 2, and place it in right here, just like that. Now, we have a space in here that we can detail, but first I'm going to maybe move the door over. We need to think about how much space do we really have in here, you know? It's going to be constrained because we have the roof cutting back. So I think this is where a section might be helpful. I want to look in this section here. I'm going to move this section up and then go to that view. And this will help me decide some things about heights and so on. So let's put in a model line here. And the plane that I want to draw that in is, I'll pick a plane, and that plane will be, I don't know. Well, really what I want to do is just sketch here. I want to sketch lines on here. So what I need is a plane that's perpendicular to this view. So if I'm going to draw a model line, maybe I can pick one of these reference planes, east-west or north-south. I think east-west is what I want here. And in order to edit the sketch, we need to look in the east elevation. Okay, this is incorrect. No, I don't want to view it this way. I want to view it north-south. So that's not right. Here, I'll try again. I'll try north-south, and now I can actually draw it here. So that's what I was looking for. I want to draw a line that is offset, let's say 8 feet from the line that I trace over. So it's not visible. It must be behind the section marker. So undo. But it was way up here, wasn't it? So we don't really have a lot of space in here, which kind of makes me think that we might want to move this roof up a bit. And you can see that even with the door. There's not a lot of room in there. So I'm going to try to push this up higher. I'll select the roof and I'm going to move that up, let's say 2 feet. And that still works. It gives us more room to play with. I'll look in the section views. And I'm going to draw a line in here. Can I see it? No. What we really need is a reference plane that we can draw on. So right up here, I'm going to draw a reference plane. And I'm going to draw that right across here. I'm going to give it a name. Call it temp. Okay? And then when I go back to my section view and I try to draw in here, I'm going to set my work plane to be on my temp reference plane. Now I should be able to draw and see what I'm actually drawing here because it's on that reference plane. So I'm going to draw that 8 feet high, and this is giving me a sense of how much space I have in here now. So if that's an 8-foot ceiling, I think we can actually fit what we need to in here. Okay, so now that I have these model lines in here, I'm just going to measure them using this tool here. I'm going to measure from the center line over here is about 5'6". So that's the key piece of information that I need to know. So let's go back into level 2, and I'm going to sketch in a wall that's similar to this one in here somewhere. And then I'm going to select that wall and move this witness line to the center here. And then I can see the dimension is 5 feet. I'm going to make it 5'6". So it's 5'6" from this center line. And that should give us enough room to have an 8-foot ceiling. Now I'm going to mirror this over to the other side. So this is going to be our narrow secondary bedroom. And it should give us actually enough room to have a bathroom. So I'm going to draw in a bathroom here. And I will create a similar door over here somewhere. And we can have plenty of room for a shower and a sink and a toilet. And this will be the room. So I'll let you detail that however you like. And I'm just going to put a couple windows here so we can see that from the exterior. Maybe they should be a little smaller, about like this. And I'd like a symmetrical window on the other side. So I'll take that and mirror it around this axis. Let's take a look at that now in the 3D view. There it is. If we want a garage door, I'm going to look at BIM object here, or a garage door, and this is an interesting possibility, this type of door. I'll download that, and I'm going to deselect and just choose, let's say, this biggest one, the Revit file, download that, and once that's downloaded, I'm going to drag that into Revit. It upgrades the model to the current version, and I can place that here, and we just need to make some adjustments to it to have it be suitable. So firstly, I'm going to edit the type, and let's see what we have available to us. We can change lots of different materials. We can change the width. Let's say that's 16 feet. And the height, we can specify that to be 10 feet. And let's see what that does. So 10 feet's probably too high is what I'm thinking. Let's look at that in back view here. And I'm going to go into wireframe mode. And here in wireframe mode, we can see the floor. So this is clearly too high. It's going up above the floor above. So I'm going to edit that type and make it, see what happens at 8 feet. It's working. It's a little high, maybe. Let's put it down at 7 foot, 7'9". And that places it just below the floor, which is perfect. We can also open up the door or close the door. Somewhere in here, we're going to have a parameter that lets us do that, I think. Here it is, 80% open. So you can have that be closed, or you can have it be more open. And let's look at that again in shaded mode. And definitely the Cybertruck is going to fit in there. And it's looking great. We just need to center it. So let's go to level 1, figure this out. So I can align it to the center line here, like so. And I could also flip this over so that all of that hardware that wraps the door up is on the interior. And I think that would be even cleaner. And so we have all that mechanism inside the space where you don't see it. So we have this nice secure door right there. So on level 1, we need a floor for that garage. So I'll go floor, and I want this to be a generic concrete floor. And it's going to be a rectangular shape, this. And then in 3D, there it is. Now, evidently this is the wrong style. I should edit that and rename that, because this is not just generic, is it? It is actually part of my project. And if that's true, then I should choose a different flooring material for this object. Great. And so I've kind of roughed out the building. Now I noticed the chimney got lost. It got trimmed away at the roof. So what I'm going to do is tab select the entire chimney and detach it from this object, and that liberates it to go up to its full height, which I specified earlier as 33 feet. All right, so you can take this much further. I'm sure you can appreciate we need more windows. We need a lot of details in the kitchen. We need furnishings and so on. But, you know, this kind of project really would take some weeks to design. And I'm trying to pack it all in a few hours. So hope you can appreciate that I'm really condensing a lot here. And I go into much more detail in my 20-hour-long comprehensive Revit architecture course for beginners. And it covers all of these topics in much more detail. I encourage you to check it out to expand your knowledge on these subjects. But I'm not quite done here. I would like to show you a few more things of how we can get this kind of design onto some sheets and how we might create output. So we have a design, And now it's time to put it on sheets. And this project template already comes with a bunch of sheets, right? And let's go and take a look at sheet A101. It already has level 1 on it. So I'm going to double click on that, on where it says A101. I'll double click, and that opens up the sheet. And so by default, it already has this view here. Now it's not really set up, and we have to do a lot of configuring to get it to display the way we want. But this is a start. So it has a viewport on it, and it has a label down below. It's also using the default title block, which you'll probably want to revise. So first up, the title block. I can click on it, and I can edit the family. And then I could get rid of this logo, put in my own, fill in this information and so on, however I wanted. I'm just going to load that into the project and close. I'm not even going to save this forever. I'm just going to say no to that, but it will load it into my project where I can override the existing one and have a unique title block for this particular project. But of course, if you're working in a company, they'll have their own title blocks already set to go. So we have a viewport here, and that's represented by this black border, and it's displaying the project in the current scale. So if I go back to level 1, the current scale is right here, 1/8 of an inch. If I change that to, let's say, 1/4 inch, notice that these markers got smaller and everything else remained the same. What does that mean? Well, if I go back to my sheet, you can see that the building actually doubled in size relative to the sheet because I changed the scale. And so the way I think of it is whenever you go up this list to a higher scale, you're making the ultimate drawing bigger on the sheet. When you go down the list, you're doing the opposite. So I've chosen 1/4 inch scale. It seems to fit on the sheet, but we need to make some changes by dragging this over, kind of roughly positioning it. And you see how we have all these extraneous elements that are kind of well spaced out? We want to bring those in tighter. So I can turn on the crop region. I can select these elements and just move them up closer to the building. If we wanted to add dimensions, we could do that very easily by using the dimension tool right here. So what you do is you click on the edges that you want to measure, and then you click a third point to locate the actual dimension itself. And there it is, 51 feet in this case. So you can dimension everything if you'd like. I'm going to leave it as it is for the moment. Okay, continuing on, I'm going to kind of configure this view the way I want it to display on the sheet. And part of that is moving these elevation markers in. Part of it is hiding things that you don't want to display. For example, these reference planes, I don't want to see them. So I can right click here and say hide in view category. And it's going to hide all of the reference planes. And then this here is a section, but it's displayed in this particular way. And that's happening due to a filter. And that's in the visibility graphics overrides. Edit that. And then here you'll find all these different categories of objects in Revit. And I just hid the reference lines, and they're not in this list. They're in the annotation categories list, I believe. So we can look for reference planes. So by hiding them, I really essentially just unchecked this one category. I would like to see section markers if we had any that we were showing. This is a working section mark. It's controlled by the filter over here. So anything that has the word working in it is going to be treated specially by this particular filter. And if you want to go in deeper, you can edit the filter, and you can see here that any callouts that contain the word working in them are going to be affected by this rule. And so if I don't want to see these things, I just uncheck visibility right here, and then they don't show up in my view. I would also like to exclude model lines, like these green lines here. I don't want to see them in my plan. So I can go in here, go to annotation categories, and I can start to type in the word model line, and I can then uncheck these things. Now, I'm not seeing them here. Maybe they're not shown here. What I could do is, if I'm not seeing them directly, I can select it and then go up here to hide category, and that will do it. All right, now the crop region should be brought in tighter to the stuff that you are depicting. And this leaves room for dimensions and notes and so on. And then ultimately, I'm going to turn that off. But now when I go back to the sheet, you can see that the black box is smaller because I've changed the crop region. So the viewport is one thing, And the label is another, this thing here. I can select this label and move it independently from the viewport. But kind of paradoxically, if I want to shorten this line, I don't do it by selecting this thing. I have to select the viewport. And then I get a grip on this line that I can use to resize. And when I move the viewport, the label goes with it. If I select the label, it moves independently of the viewport. This is just the way Revit works. Okay, so we have the first floor architectural plan in the current scale, 1/4 inch. But on this sheet, we have room for the second floor. So the way this template has been designed is sheet A102 has the second floor. So if I try to drag the second floor onto the sheet, it will tell me I can't do it. See? And I can see that here also there's a blue box. That means it's already on the sheet. So if I want to get this on the same sheet, I need to actually get rid of this sheet by deleting it. And when I've done that, this box is no longer blue. That means I can drag it out and put it on the sheet, like that. Now it's in the wrong scale. I want these scales to be the same. Now I can go to level 2 and change the scale and come back here. Or I can just double click on the viewport to activate it. And then I can change the scale right here. And then I can double click outside of the viewport to deactivate it. Then I can drag this over and get it lined up. And when you line it up, you'll get this dashed line that shows up, indicates that the building is lined up. So we have more work to do on this level to tighten it up. So I'll go to level 2 and we'll do things like selecting the reference plane and hiding its category. I'll select these elevation markers and just bring them in closer with the arrow keys on the keyboard. And I'd like to hide these temporary sections, so I'll go to Visibility, Graphics Overrides, Filters, uncheck Visibility, hides them. And then I can pull in the crop region closer to the building. This is sizing the viewport also. I can hide that, go back to the sheet, and you'll see that it's much more reasonable now. However, the label is not on the screen, it's down here. I need to bring that up. And when I do that, observe that it wants to snap into position adjacent to the other one. And I want to shorten that line, so I need to click on the viewport, and then I can shorten the line. So I've successfully laid out levels 1 and 2 on a single sheet. Wonderful. Now what about the elevations? Are they already here? Let's see. A201 has the north elevation. A202 has the south elevation, and so on. I think we have a really small project, and so it maybe makes more sense to have all the elevations on the same sheet. So I'm going to get rid of sheets A202 through A204, and then I'm going to make changes to this elevation to get it to fit on here better. I'll double click in the viewport, change the scale to make it bigger, and then I'm going to hide certain things. I'll go into Visibility, Graphics Overrides, Filters, make it invisible, and we have these levels that are really sticking out too far. So what I can do is pull them back in. Maybe this is best done in the actual level. So I'll double click outside the viewport, go to the, what is this? The north elevation. And here I will make some changes so that these level markers line up with one another, and then they all move in conjunction. And then I can take the crop region and tighten that up. So this is the kind of thing that you are always doing when you're laying out sheets, is kind of going through this composition process of tightening things up and then working back and forth with the sheet itself. So here we have the label and the viewport, and we want to manage the relationship between them. And then we want to position these on the sheet so that they make sense graphically. Now, as you can see, we're going to have plenty of room on this one sheet for all of the elevations. And again, I'll leave this up to you to lay out the sheet, having all 4 elevations on here. Now you could have another sheet that shows the sections, and the sections, say section 1 and section 2, let's see what they look like. So here's section 1, and section 2 looks like this. And neither of them have sheet numbers or drawing numbers on them yet because they haven't been placed on a sheet. These things automatically get filled in as soon as you place it on a sheet. So, for example, if I wanted to place this section 2 on a sheet, I'll go to architectural building sections, and then I will drag section 1 on here, and I'll drag section 2 on here. And obviously we have some cleanup to do, just like we've done before. But as soon as I do that, these bubbles get filled in. This is drawing 1 on sheet A301, and this is drawing 2 on sheet A301. Now this one is showing up in this way because it's a working section. So if I wanted to actually show that on my sheet, what I would do is go to one of these sections where I see it, click on it, and change its type from working section to building section. And then it will show up normally. By the way, you can select a section and you can break the line here so that you're not necessarily seeing the line cutting through everything in the building. You can specify how you want that to be done. You can change the scale here, and that changes the relative size of the section markers. So I can bring this down, just indicate that it cuts through the building like so. And then I can control the scope of how big that's cutting through here with this box. And so that's how you start to refine the way that your drawings appear and how they will ultimately appear on the sheets. So this obviously needs more work. We can just finish that up. So I'll go back to section 1, adjust the crop region. I don't want to see the reference lines here. And back on sheet A301, that's cleaned up already. So in this way, we can lay out our drawings on our sheets and have everything standardized and get the labels to line up with one another. Now, let's say I want to see output finally. I want to actually see this, what it would look like in a PDF. Well, that's the last stage. And we can do that by going up to File, Export, PDF. Now, if you have a device you want to print it to, you choose Print. But the output is very similar. So you can export to a CAD format or a PDF. You can print to a device, or you can actually print to a PDF. When you do that, you get this big dialog box, and you need to select what you want to output, just the current window, or just a part of that window, or selected views or sheets. And so here we can choose what we want to output. And right here, we can hide anything that's unchecked. So when I uncheck these, they disappear from the list, you see? And I don't want anything below here. I haven't designed any of these things. And in fact, I think we only have sheets A101 through A303 that we've done. Okay, select that. Now we could save this collection of sheets for the future. If we wanted to do that, we could just say yes and give it a name. I'll say no. And then we give a file name and the location where we're going to save that. The page size, typically you would use the sheet size. You can fit it to the page or zoom at a certain percentage. I find that zooming to 100% is more reliable than fit to page. Fit to page seems to give some white space around the sheet. Zoom 100% is literally the extent of the sheet. You can place that in the center. And then here you have a choice of how you want to output color. Color can just be in color, or you can force it to be grayscale or black and white by choosing black lines. You can also set the raster quality. That is, and if you have any renderings that you've included on your sheets, you can set their quality here. And typically you'll want to leave vector processing as the selection because you'll get crisper output, but you'll need to select raster for renderings. And it will do that automatically for you anyway. So just leave this on vector for the most part. And then down below here, we can hide certain categories of things in the output, like scope boxes or crop boundaries. We won't see those. This will be hidden at the last second before the output is created. Finally, you just click export and it will save the PDF, and that's it. So hopefully you've enjoyed this process of taking a design all the way from zero to a developed design that you can elaborate on more fully on your own. So my 20-hour video course is tailored to help learners acquire professional level expertise in Autodesk Revit, regardless of your prior knowledge or experience. With the help of step-by-step instructions and practical exercises, you'll gain comprehensive knowledge of the software and learn how to use it proficiently for designing and modifying complex building structures, managing project data, and collaborating with your peers. So please check it out. The link is in this video's description.